Thanks for joining us. Our big story on 12 News at 6. The FBI is warning for the first time that French conspiracy theories are feeding domestic terrorism.
Now, that warning is coming from the Bureau's Phoenix office. And here's one example. A bizarre claim: the Clinton family was behind a Tucson site where children were being raped.
Talk a lot about conspiracy theories, and I've seen you talk about, aliens and JFK assassination and all this stuff. It's fun to debunk this stuff, right? It's sort of fun to think about them, whether even 9/11, thinking, at least entertaining the ideas of whatever they may be, that our government did it, or this or that, whatever it is. It's sort of fun to always entertain those ideas, but basically you come down on all this stuff that I think what Carl Sagan would say, that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
People have this vision of, governments as these super powerful agents that can do anything. Mostly they're just like bureaucrats at the DMV.
Right.
That's what you're dealing with.
Right. So in a way, it's the same thing as religion. The people that are going down the conspiracy path, they want some easy answer for an extremely complex issue that we really often have no answer for.
It's like the economy is not this complex system that no one can really understand or predict. It's 12 guys living in London calling the shots, the Illuminati, and they're pulling the strings and making this happen. And
so it is the same thing as religion, because that feels nice. If you could sort of wrap yourself around that's how the world actually operates. It's sort of the same thing as saying, there's a God, and I'm going to believe that because
it is like a God or a committee of gods or something that's pulling the strings, and it grants way more power than than anybody actually has.
A lot of Canadians seem to be screaming at each other these days. In fact, a recent poll suggests over a quarter of us view people who don't vote like us as enemies. It feels like we're all being asked to pick a side, and often that's about immigration. We saw it with Brexit, and we see it with Donald Trump. And now that same debate is getting a lot louder here. But here's the thing. Part of the battle is being driven by misinformation, by fake news, but also by a web of conspiracy theories that are changing the way voters see the world. And as we saw with Brexit and Trump, you don't need much to shift the vote. It's become such an issue in our politics that this week, Elections Canada announced it will deploy misinformation teams to monitor social media during this fall's election.
Maggie Haberman. Maggie, it just so happens you have a story in the Times today about the president and his love, addiction, one might say.
Trafficking in.
Conspiracy theories.
Right. We saw going back to the campaign, and before that, beginning with birtherism, which was a blatant lie about where the president of the United States at the time, Barack Obama, was born and whether he was a citizen and therefore whether he was legitimate. We have known for a very long time that Donald Trump likes to traffic in conspiracy theories. He's now doing it from the Oval Office, which is incredibly different. He is elevating everything he says, everything that he says that isn't confirmed, everything he says that is a suspicion of his, everything that is sort of a churn in right-wing media that he then pushes back out there into the ecosystem. He is putting a stamp of legitimacy on, and the real concern for his critics and some not critics is that it is further eroding trust in institutions.
So, John, you've actually written a book about this. You've written a lot about conspiracy theories. They've always been around, but now you've got them sort of in the mainstream media. You've got them sort of in the White House. What's going on?
Well, conspiracy theories tend to be theories of evil and of illegitimate power. And the whole basis of the Trump presidency is the idea that there are illegitimate elites who are running the world. And so it's not surprising that Trump himself, who was at the center of the so-called birther movement 5 years ago, 10 years ago, that he would still have a fondness for this sort of thing, and he would surround himself with people who enable these kind of conspiracy theories. It's true that I wrote a book about it back in 2011, and I mentioned Trump, but never in my wildest dreams would I imagine that he would actually become the president. In that book, I described conspiracy theorists as on the margins, and I worried about them becoming more prominent. But nowhere in that book, unfortunately, did I predict that one of them would actually occupy the White House.
Right, yeah. So like the New World Order, the Trilateral Commission, the Illuminati, the Freemasons.
Yes.
It was all connected. This is before I knew it all led to Jews are bad. So... Wow. Being a Jew was not something I wanted to be part of. But here's what happened. So I'm with my buddy Jim, who works in D.C. He's been working in D.C. for Obama, Clinton, for a lot of presidents. He's been there like most of his life, and he's walking me around the government building. This is right when I'm in the middle of the conspiracy thing, and I just start rambling on about it, like, this is all garbage. This is a mystical space. The Washington Monument is lined up with the Capitol because it's satanic, and like it was crazy, right? So I go on for like 10 minutes with this huge theory. And my friend Jim is just looking at me, and I stop, I take a breath, and he goes, people here just aren't that organized. And I kind of nipped it in the bud.
At the end of that, you go, oh, wow, I guess he's right.
Princess Diana was killed by a conspiracy, and so on. And so what the authors argue is that this reflects a psychological bias called the projection bias. And Sigmund Freud, he famously talked about projection as a psychological tendency, but Freud talked about projection as this kind of illicit thing where we project our socially undesirable tendencies onto somebody else. And we say, I am a perfectly fine human being, everybody else is terrible. And we're projecting outwards. That's not what psychologists think of projection anymore. We understand projection as a very general psychological bias. But in some cases, like in this experiment, we are projecting outwards our Machiavellian traits, our desire, our willingness to take part in conspiracies. And if you're the kind of person who thinks, I would probably conspire given the opportunity, then you project that out and you imagine that the world is full of potential conspirators. Everybody else probably would as well. And if you live in a world full of potential conspirators, then it becomes more likely that historically somebody did that these conspiracy theories are true, that somebody did fake the moon landing. And so this projection bias, this is the first inclination that psychology plays a role in people's acceptance of conspiracy theories. It's not all to do with the facts, it's to do with our psychological understanding of the world as well.
Well, welcome everybody to the Truth Warrior podcast. My name is David Whitehead. I am very happy to be here with you. I hope you enjoyed that little clip that I just stitched together prior to the show, just to illustrate the conversation that is happening right now in the mainstream about this topic of conspiracy. And being somebody that has looked into various conspiracies myself, I've been researching this some time, I couldn't think of anybody better to bring on and dissect this at a deep level other than my good friend and colleague, Michael Tsarion. For those that are just joining me here, I know I have new people joining this show all the time. Michael and I are also, we work together on the Unslaved podcast, which I would consider to be the advanced class in these kinds of subjects. And you can check out that over at unslaved.com. But I wanted Michael to come on, and I wanted us to do a public show today on YouTube for you all about this notion of conspiracy. Is it crazy? Is it just psychological projection? Are there any legitimate conspiracies? Or is it just a bunch of stuff that we should brush aside and not consider? So Michael, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. And maybe I'll just get your first reaction from that little video that I played for you.
It needs to be discussed from both sides. There's pros and cons, but what you basically saw there is intellectual violence being deified. You also heard the complete misrepresentation of the subject that they're meant to be, parading. They chose, the mainstream media has chosen to feature this. Well, then why aren't they representing it correctly? All right. There were so many disingenuous misrepresentations of what the conspiracy movement, conspiracyites, actually advocate. They didn't cite Jim Marrs. They didn't cite Smedley Butler. They didn't cite generals, presidents,
right,
ex-deans of colleges, nobles, royals, intelligentsia, that far surpasses any of those measly, mangy twogs that you just heard. Some of them didn't even look human, and probably aren't. There's a conspiracy for you. They've lost their humanity. Because what you saw there was about as alien as it gets. Only they're alien in that way, have lost their souls. Because those are people who've not only bought a particular narrative, but they believe, I think I brought this out in an article that's on the Michael Tsarion website called Refuting the Refuters. And as soon as I saw these things that you'd sent me, it brought that to mind, that these are people who have so little respect for knowledge that they think it can be territorialized, like a dog urinating on a lamppost. And that's all you saw, is hands off. We are the self-appointed authority, right? This is governmente, right? The control of the mind. This is authoritarianism of its most extreme version, or Orwellian in proportions, but they can't self-reflect to see any of the bigger, because I don't have also a lot of confidence in conspiratorialists. We'll get to that in a minute. There's been many changes within this movement, but at its best, it's not about believing anything untoward. It's not about believing anything necessarily controversial. That's already a misrepresentation. What it is in its essence, because look at the word only means getting together, having a common goal, right? Conspire, to breathe together, to work together. And that can be for the good as it can be for the bad. But of course, the meaning they mean is that it's always for the bad. But actually, they're quite wrong in the representation of the subject, because all it really means is that somebody has decided of their own free will to step back from the canvas to look at the bigger picture, something these people can never do. They think they are doing it because they believe in scientism. And science has awarded itself with the fallacy that it steps back from the picture and views the whole, when in fact it doesn't, because that what I'm talking about describes a right-brained kind of person. And there are no right-brained scientists. So they're already defeating their own rhetoric and their own purpose. So it's just violence, intellectual violence from highly authoritarian people. You opened with the Tolstoy quote, government is an institution that does violence to the rest of us. What you saw there was academic, intellectual grandstanding and extreme hubris. But it's like I say, in refuting the refuters, it's in a intellectual context. It's bully boy mafia tactics, pushing up against the wall, go empty your pockets, buddy.
Right.
But it's this in this grandstanding bully boy world heavyweight wrestling, intellectual. They've been awarded the badge, David, and they've been awarded the parking space. There's no greater tyrant walking the face of the earth, and they'll lose the media right now, because it's like the dog pissing on the lamppost, off limits to any other person. And it's incredible to view this, and that's primarily the way I would see it. That's primarily what I saw there. There's small lies. Like, I don't think Freud ever used the word projection. The Freudian term is transference. You didn't hear that. It was Jung that invented projection. So he's meant to be a psychologist up there. Was that Ted?
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that, right? He can't even get his terms right. That's a small one, forgivable. But it goes all the way up to, I said, grander misinterpretations. I don't know how long we actually have in this. Is it an hour, 2 hours? Because I want to finally get to those. Remember those articles that you sent me? We'll go through them line by line. Sure. And I hopefully at the end of that, people will see exactly what I say now, which is whether it's a verbal speech on a TV show, chat show, or whether it's in the article form, which of course more detailed. Let's make that clear, that when it's an article form, they make the case more solidly. Good, because now I can take it apart solidly, right? And we'll have a few slides on that at the end. But yeah, what you saw there was a form of intellectual violence against a subculture that has every reason in the world to exist, just like any other subculture that exists. And so their comment on conspiratorialists presupposes we're a subculture, right? Then why don't you go after emos and goths? Why don't you go after the gays and whoever's got a subculture? Well, they won't. They'll just come after us. So that's that, as I said, that's that bully boy tactics, of the schoolyard. And it's totally facile as well as erroneous.
Right, and it's this idea that you can't question the status quo. You can't question the authority. You can't question the new sort of priesthood, whoever that's going to be, whoever's going to be put out as these are the experts. Don't think for yourself. And this is something that I've always been repulsed by, and that's why I personally entertain this notion of conspiracies or alternative ways of seeing the world, if that's how you want to put it. I brought you on too, Michael, because that end of that clip, you were just referencing it there, that guy that was talking about Freud and psychology. He's got a 2-hour set, and there's a few other speakers that were at this conference talking about this in relation to conspiracy theories. And they were trying to basically pin some kind of psychological reason, like as if the conspiracy researchers themselves are engaged in some kind of conspiracy of their own against reason or something, where the reason they believe these things is because they're gullible, or they had something happen to them as a child, or they don't fit in, they're the outsider, so therefore they're going to always see the world conspiratorially. And they tried to bring that whole narrative in. You're the first researcher I've ever come across that's ever brought, in a pro sense, into the conspiracy or alternative research community, this notion of how important psychology is. And so, in looking at, what's going on with these FBI memos and the media talking about how, we have to watch out these conspiracy theorists because they could be leading the charge in all this domestic terrorism. You know, let's forget about the real forces of terrorism in our communities, and let's go after these fringe people that are just trying to question what they are seeing. And let's also leave aside the media's complicity and how many lies and misinformation, how much misinformation goes on there, and on we could go. And let's just attack it in a general sense, because they know that the average person out there is not going to think twice about this. They don't want there to be any kind of ulterior agenda going on, or agendas for power. They don't want to know that mafias are out there competing on the world stage, and they don't want to know about that. So it allows a way out. So it's funny how they're trying to accuse people such as ourselves that are honestly looking at these types of anomalies and these elements in history and in current political climate. They're trying to make it look like we're trying to dodge some truth that they know, whereas I actually think it's the other way around. I don't know. What do you think?
100%. 100%. And when you say that they're quoting psychology, that's you can not scrub anything to do with their comments on psychology, on conspiracy. They misrepresent psychology more than they could ever represent any other subject. Are they talking about the Thomas Zaz psychiatry, which has medicalized the entire world and pathologized all normal behavior? Are they talking from the DSM?
Right.
Forget the critique of a conspiracy for just a day or two. I got something more to dip into. Never let these people ever say the word psychology, because then I really get interested, because they are the people who are the least psychological. They have literally put in the struts and the foundations of an anti-psychological society, which you and I have talked about endlessly. We're doing it again right now in our Women on the Unconscious, series. So the very moment that they would disingenuously try to strengthen their case by quoting psychology, you win hands down if you know psychology. Now, granted, most people in this movement don't, so there's a weakness they've allowed. I've been addressing that weakness. I've been saying to my audience since I came on the scene, which is don't leave consciousness at the door. You're letting your enemy win, and here's perfect proof of it. They dare, and you know why? Because you answered it already. They know that nobody's going to give a shit. Nobody's going to check them. Nobody's going to blue pencil them, or on that. So they get away with it. But see, you know who the most critical person on the subject of conspiracy is? Me. I don't need them, right? I see what they're doing, and they have their own disingenuous purposes. But see, I am never being say we, because I want to look at things from different perspectives, and we do that. Let's, in order to help undermine what they're doing, we have to first make very clear the lines in the sand. And that is that we are not necessarily, or I am not anyway, spokesman for this movement of so-called conspiracy research. Because as we've already pointed out, it has changed also. Right. So when you come back to sanity, right, these diatribes, this muck throwing is vaguely interesting, right? It happens. It's a consequence of what you say, that, we're kicking down so many doors and overturning so many sacred cows. But you see, the movement itself, if they were truly, I'm faulting them for their lack of critique, for the paucity of their critique. And I think it's important to say a few words about that before we go forward, because it's very important that when you set yourself up as a spokesman, see, some people are trying to do that. They're actually trying to recast themselves as spokesmen for this conspiratorial movement, and that doesn't work, actually, because there's nothing really to crow about, right? Half the people, more than half the people, no, let me be blunt about it. I'd say about 95% of the people that we call, figures in this movement don't even cite their forebears. Some of them advertise themselves saying they owe nothing to the past. These are teachers in this movement right now. My message from day one has been always that you owe everything to the past. And not only that, but even philosophically, the past is an archive of wisdom which you must dip in. There's people out there verbally telling their audience, these are meant to be teachers. How donkey braying mules that they are when they say, I owe nothing to anyone. So you owe nothing to G. Edward Griffin and to Eustace Mullins and to Ezra Pound and 100 other great thinkers, the Senator Joe McCarthy, right? To umpteen people that I've not only researched but know their names of. Umpteen thinkers. There's people out there who have recast themselves as teachers in this movement. You think I'm worried about these detractors in the mainstream media? I'm far more concentrated on the kind of mangy weasels that have set themselves up within this movement And don't you see then, it's implied in what I'm saying, that if this movement is indeed infested with these communists, these scavenger researchers, these absolute egomaniacal people, that it invites criticism from the mainstream? Mainstream, see, you know what it says? The truth needs no defense. Remember that old one? People better mull that over. The truth needs no defense. It only needs defense when it ceases to be truth, and that can happen. So the 5% of the great geniuses, most of them gone now, who started this movement were men of greatness. Even if I don't agree with them, I still think they're great. I still salute them.
Right.
Many of them were Christians, right? But if this movement has been taken over by third-class tickets, plagiarizers, coat-tail riders with nothing but derivative research, who don't even cite, who brag about not the fact that they don't cite or source, who just spout plain silliness like flat Earth, and do you think that's all there is? I'm from the ninth dimension, and all this shash.
There is a
right?
lot of nonsense.
We have a
in
major,
there. Yeah,
right, and we have a lot of problems then. And then, so when you see a bout like this will pass away, as you say. But when you see this bout, or when maybe some people even do sign on for it, well, I sympathize. If you have a listen to multi-millions of people, something that climbed out of an attic of a lunatic asylum, climbed on the lamppost and went and got a YouTube channel. Yeah, I think I might join your team, thinking they're tin hat crazies. I'm calling the van to take them back to the fucking funny farm that they came from, half these twogs. You and I have talked about, if I may just add one point, this movement, just to against, corroborate what I'm talking about. And that is that, this movement is the purveyor of the deepest flagrant lies against, right, the Jews, for instance, right? It's deeply anti-Semitic, deeply so. There's writers out there in their hundreds, if not even their thousands, who have not got further when it comes to addressing the reasons for the world conspiracy, because I believe there is a world conspiracy, right? But in their thousands who have not got past Jew. How can you have respect for that hopeless fallacy? These are people who are purveying falsity. I went into it in my Jews and Templars article. People can find the link on michaeltsarion.com. Go prove me wrong. That's as far as you've got. I look like I might join that team. Because for any seasoned researcher, in the beginning, hey, no problem, right? There's a case to be made about it, especially before 1948. We're not exonerating or not saying that there wasn't some sort of Jewish conspiracy. But the case for that is now so paltry and weak that only a total liar and deceiver, certainly no seasoned researcher, could go for it. And if they do, it tells me everything. Again, we're talking quality here. We're talking quality of research. Probably even equal to that is the lies that are purveyed about Georg Hegel. This Hegelian dialectic spewed forth by every so-called leader in this field. You can't come to the bottom of it. I know who originated it. I understand that it was even unintentional. But unfortunately, that cannot stop the snowball effect, where people of low intellect and again, scavenger research just kept, borrowed a concept of the famous Hegelian dialectic, the one that was purveyed in its negative sense, and just continued to reiterate that ad infinitum. They're still doing it. And it doesn't bear the slightest resemblance to anything that Hegel ever said. In fact, it barely even shows resemblance to Hegel's worst detractors. It's that low. Right? Even Marx and others did such violence to Hegel. The conspiracy form of violence is even worse than that. So I'm just throwing a few examples. And all of these can be substantiated and backed up. We could go into the misconceptions about the history of Iran, the history of the Protestant Catholic thing in Northern Ireland. We have gone into, just to adjunct to the thing about the Jews, if anybody, how can there be a Jewish conspiracy of this magnitude when the main threat at your door right now, the real three-headed monster, demonstrable to everyone, Tommy Robinson was in jail the last time I fucking looked, is Islam. No. Excuse me. It's the rise of Islamo-communism. You know, Islamo-communism. You all know about that, right? Or did you miss it? Shitty research. Of course you fucking missed it. Of course we're one of the only people to talk about it. Of course we're the only ones addressing what's obviously demonstrable. And so I have to admit that most of the people in this movement of late are up to here, right? In their swamps of sewage, in their chronic blindness. Listening to highly paid agents of Islamo-communism. And I wish, my heart's greatest dream is I wish I could name the names. I could do it. But I'll be here for the next hour doing it. And something holds me back.
The live stream might get shut down if you did, but
yeah,
we'll leave that for another time.
But we listen to these highly paid agents. Oh, they have the power. In fact, we'll not go there, right? But knowing nothing of Jewish history, there's a thing called Jewish history. It's not shining all the way. Nobody's saying it is. There's obnoxious parts of it. Huh? No. But there's also obnoxious parts of Islamic history, which is the frightful enemy of the West that nobody is addressing. In fact, they're promoting.
And Christian history. There's nobody gets out of this unscathed. History.
No. So how can one, by rights, like I said, some of these people are actually trying to do this now, because they've been scratching around for an original idea and can't find one, so they joined the bandwagon now of defending conspiracy movement. Why? Why would you defend that crud? And in my work, I continue to prove them utterly wrong, to call them out, to remind people, genuine people, to beware of them. There is more. Dr. John Coleman, people back this up, that there's more danger, right, of being waylaid, because you open your mind, and there's agent provocateurs lying in wait. They are the ones who you can kind of tell, because on the web, on the internet and social media, they get extremely popular, right? But they can be just as much a fraud, just as much a threat. And they frequent this conspiracy movement, and they're now able to make greater use of social media. So there's some things that these critics, we'll get to them in a minute, but I just wanted to throw them a couple of stars, because there's some things that they're saying are actually have the ring of truth, even though they're doing it in a, scoffing manner. But the good news is that if you're a true researcher into the conspiracy movement, you'll know what I'm saying, and you'll find it quite easy to contradict, these types of weasels that have recast themselves as teachers in this field. They're really children of the internet, and their research is paper thin and very, very derivative. And of course, they will not find themselves shadow banned for the most part. In fact, if anything, they'll be carried through the streets. So this thing that you've sent me, and these incredible shots that you got there, these clips, just reminded me to say in the loudest possible voice, that I do not serve the masses. I'm not part of any movement. I'm not a spokesman for it. Never have been, never will be. What we're doing in my level is highly cited and highly intellectual. It is bulletproof, and it is on guard. It is extremely defensive and on guard, because I've never in my work ever pointed to them on the hill. I've never pointed to the masters only. I'm very interested, more interested since Architects of Control, and even before that, to point out what is it that the slave is doing to bring these kinds of overlords about. What is he signing on for? What is it he doesn't want to face about himself? And we don't want to talk about it here, but that's just, again, an overview, right? And
well,
right
just sorry to cut you off, Michael, but to add there is that what I think people that might be new to this are missing is that there is a component to, I think, each human being to act in a conspiratorial manner in some way, like to hide and to have agendas, to have strategies. If we can accept that there is a psychological component to this, even in our own individual lives, that create master-slave dynamics within our own social groups, within our family, within the places that we work, we create master-slave relationships all over the place. And that's why when you brought that bombshell into this whole movement, if that's what we're going to call it, of saying that, hey, this isn't just about pointing fingers up the hill at these overlords. I mean, they exist. There's this hidden hand of control, and there's always competing agendas, and there's evil in the world. That's the thing that we have to understand. There is evil in the world. Hate to break it to you. But the thing is what you asked was, well, and why do we put up with it? Why do we keep voting in Mao Zedongs and Adolf Hitlers and all these people? Why do we keep signing on for it? Not just in the political sense, but just in your everyday relationships. That's a huge component to this. So that's why when I heard that one guy talking about it from that angle of why people are attracted to maybe like, oh, reptilian monsters and all this shit, fine, I get it, and I understand that. But then they always throw into that basket, oh, and then anything about the Illuminati and then history or the Vatican or like he was referencing, the Washington State, the alignments, David Ovison's stuff. And they start putting all this stuff into one basket, and then it just disintegrates. And now everybody walks away and goes, oh, yeah, see, there's no evil in the world. There's nothing to worry about. Back to, just forgetting that I'm alive and waiting to be dead. You know what I mean?
Yes, and remember, some of the people that they're not mentioning to you, they don't mention the names, are much more academic credentialed than they are. And we'll probably have to, really unpack that a little bit later in the conversation, But the main thing is that if this movement, the way I looked at it when I saw these things today is that if we don't weed out, or have at the very least the discernment, right, to see what is fallacious and what even might be worse. I mean, this movement has had its own share of even child molesters right here. See, I can't. I've been involved in this movement for 30 years, and I've said barely nothing. There's many reasons for that about what I know and what I've seen from inside the conspiracy movement. And also, even of late, say I don't get into all of that history. Just of late, the fact that it's mostly just headline chasing. You and I have done all the things on psychology and women's psychology and Dragon Mother, and look at just look at the simple palette of subjects. The repertoire that we've dealt with is second to none. Part of that is, still looking at conspiracies. Conspiracy is legitimate. It's a legitimate thing to look at alternatives. Remember, I said to pull back from the canvas. I encourage that. It's actually a form of forensic science. So, we'll get to later when these people critique it, how utterly disingenuous they are. Because a genuine conspiracy theorist is the general or the MI6 officer, of which we have them, Dr. John Coleman, who one day, straying into the office of his superior, happened to see a document, a folder saying, for your eyes only or above top secret, opened it and saw that there was a fucking conspiracy. Sorry, folks. People of eminence, far greater than any of those twogs that you saw talking there, have proved the fact. Can you go to that second slide and read it? Here's an example. The CIA director.
It's William Casey.
The CIA director, William Casey. Read that, please, David, if you will.
He says, we'll know our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false.
There's no conspiracy, David. Go to the next one, please.
Right. Oh, Mr. David Rockefeller himself. He says, we are on the verge of a global transformation. All we need is the right major crisis, and the nations will accept, wait for it, the New World Order. So David Rockefeller was a New World Order conspiracy theorist here.
Go to the next one.
Woodrow Wilson, 1913. Our system is concentrated in the hands of a few men. We have come to be one of the worst ruled, one of the most completely controlled and dominated governments in the world. No longer a government of free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of small groups of dominant men.
And he should know he was one of them. And from Carol Quigley. See, when I talk about people of seniority, I mean also, I should stress it, there is no more senior to get. The sources I deal with are the highest in the land. You don't get any higher. You don't get more experienced. And these quotes are multipliable. Right? You can't come to the end of it. We have top people from the senior corporations telling government officials, I can't remember exactly now, but I think it was the Gates Commission, when the officials from that commission went out to study, the fraud of the major corporations, and the fact that they were backed by communism. The leaders of that commission, I can put the links below later on for people who want to be more specific, were actually told, right, that these are state-appointed officials, were told that we mold public opinion. The people mold themselves with perfect docility to our molding hands. People at the highest, levels of the police and these investigative, committees were having meltdowns. Right, they were having nervous breakdowns listening to these members of these Rockefeller boards as they told them. David Rockefeller, you just read from him, he also had a public speech in which he thanked the press for keeping their conspiracy secret, from bamboozling the people. Those kinds of quotes go on and on ad infinitum. Go to the next one.
Edward Bernays, the conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country.
So there is someone, right, referring once again, just like the other ones you just read, and there's only 4 bloody comments, 4 quotes, referencing the fact that there is in existence an elite group. And Bernays is from advertising, psychology. The other ones are presidents, and you could go on, generals. So it's quite a wide variety of different people commenting on this, right? So it's not just from one area. But the basic meme is, and you get it in many movies as well, by top producers and the wealthiest men in Hollywood admitting all of this, that there is an elite group actively engaged in mind and behavior control and manipulation. So you're not taking on Michael Tsarion and David Whitehead and a few other people that you can pillory. The truth needs no defense. It comes from the highest there is, from ministers of czars. I've got quotes from, right? Ministers of czars, top presidents, even people deeply embedded in the conspiracy. But then they have in their memoirs, or in their deathbed, they recant. William the Conqueror did it in the 11th century. It can happen. And we have to then, what I do is collate their works and then present those works with no agenda whatsoever, so that somebody can just dispassionately make up their own mind. But that's what they hate. They hate that. See, they used to be dealing with an illiterate population for centuries. And it's only in the latter 20th century that people have even the reading skills or the writing skills, or let alone any other kind of communicative skills, or technical skills, even to use the medium, the media that's involved. They are up against that now. They've always been smarting about it. And I've mentioned that in all my works, like Architects of Control, from the beginning. So this is just a natural blowback. Do you know something else? It's not even blowback against the subject matter of conspiracy. If you listen back to all of that stuff, they're barely really ever representing the subject matter. They make a few anecdotes, but of course they make the ones of the most lampoonable and bizarre, right? Mostly just to make, again, to lambast their enemy, their rivals. But that's understandable. Of course they'd do that. But they're really actually not talking about conspiracy content. They're talking about the word conspiracy. Most of that blowback is rhetorical. You don't hear it first because it's covered up. They're against the very word being used. And how they defend against this word that's come into our lexicon is to counter it with a whole other set of talismanic words. You heard several of them there. Terrorism, threat. What was that other one? Trafficking. Trump is trafficking in it. Right. Is he really? Is he really? Oh, my God, arrest him immediately. Where's the butterfly fucking nets? But the word, as I said, only means it's working in unison. And even a retard, somebody in the circle of the mafia, I don't know what, drug lords, knows that it's entirely possible there could be a working together, working in unison for a malign end or just a profit-making end, or internationally. Did they talk about the offshore bank accounts of the black nobility? No, I think I missed that one. Did you hear it? No, I don't. Maybe they did. They must have done, right? Must have done. Or the Switzerland connection, or the bankers who created the World War and the world's debt. So really, at the end of the day, you don't even want to really attach a lot of importance and get bent out of shape, defending against this, because the truth needs no defense. I even have a question mark about those who might even try to do that, especially when I look at their past. But yeah, if you come to the hard proof to try and take these people down, it's actually not that hard. Remember Watergate? Well, all the way from Watergate to Pizzagate. Fuck, what are you talking about? You can go back, as Geo Griffin does, to Benedict Arnold and other earlier events. As I say, the not only the world wars, but some of the aftermath of the world wars, known as the stab in the back fiasco, and many, many others. But you do have up-to-date versions of it. Pizzagate. You have the creation of the Federal Reserve. How can anybody think that the foundation of the Federal Reserve had any resemblance to democratic procedure? Have already people's amnesia? They've already forgot about the weapons of mass destruction and the whole fiasco over Iraq and Iran. What about this Clinton body count? They mentioned something about Clinton. You haven't even took the lid off the box of that crime family and the communistic backing. Do you remember in the 70s, it was AIDS?
Right. Yeah.
And the conspiracy movement chimed in. Yeah, the conspiracy movement chimed in with its theory that it was a man-made disease. No, the creator of it chimed in and said, I made it. There's no conspiracy in the world. When Dr. whatever, I can't remember his name right now, Strecker, I think his name was, Robert Strecker, that's right, and others in his team, said, these are the people in the laboratory, one-to-one, he said it, his lips did move, saying it was a conspiracy to wipe out the human race. There's no conspiracy. NAFTA has been whistleblown from people within. See, like I told you, I don't really deal with conspiracy people. People within. 9/11 is the same story. Think about the how many actual policy cover-ups have been done by just the government alone, governments, Bush government, whatever government, Obama government, without the collusion of the people. Policies pushed, when the Senate or the Congress is actually out on Christmas break and things like that. And then back to the point again, it needs to be made again. What about the memoirs and the statements of Paul Warburg, the Rockefellers, H.G. Wells?
He wrote a whole book on it.
Bertrand Russell, Brzezinski, Kissinger, George Bush. Remember, Bush was saying something about if the people only knew what was going on behind closed doors, they'd chase us down the streets and hack us to pieces. You saw one from Bernays, and I can multiply that on and on and on. So more and more and more and more on these TV debates, they never invite an opponent to sit at the table. It's almost become completely authoritarian, completely one-sided. And that alone shows you how disingenuous they are. Because they can phone up Alex Jones. He'll take him on. I'll take him on.
Exactly.
They can do that. There's plenty of others who could take him on. Reagan and Kissinger, both, by the way, see, I'm just pointing out amnesia here, right? You can't even count the books that expose the CFR and the Trilateral Commission from insiders of those organizations. You can't count them. They're masterpieces. Reagan and Kissinger both spoke of fucking the people up with alien threat agenda. They not only toyed with it behind scenes, they openly admitted on public platforms so that the people could be manipulated. We don't want to break it down now, but anxiety, pulling the rug. We've talked about in our work how they do that. Well, these guys do it. And one of the ways that they thought they could pull the rug to keep us into this herd think is by, projections of an alien threat. And they really, really toyed with this. And then it was disclosed, so just incredible.
And to add even to add more, if you want to go up the fractal, there was a quote you referenced years ago. I've cited it a few times, but it's worth repeating again. It comes from the Grand Master of World Freemasonry, the Duke of Brunswick himself. So if you want to talk about Freemasonry and all these secret societies, there's guys within those secret societies saying there's a conspiracy within our secret societies. He says,
that's right.
I have been convinced that we, as an order, have come under the power of some very evil occult order, profoundly versed in science, both occult and otherwise, though not infallible, their methods being black magic, that is to say, electromagnetic power, hypnotism, and powerful suggestion. We are convinced that the order is being controlled by some sun order after the nature of the Illuminati, if not by that order itself. So when they go, oh, we could pull out the trilateral and the Illuminati and all this stuff. Well, are you going to go chase down the Duke of Brunswick from the 1700s and call him a tinfoil hat wearing guy?
And many others. A lot of those quotes were actually, you see, there's only a few of them been translated. There's entire books out there that are in French and German, haven't been translated in English. I wonder why.
Yeah.
John Robinson, who's a top professor, wrote a book called Proofs of a Conspiracy. See, they won't mention any of this stuff. You see, but we don't even need to go that far. In terms of an American conspiracy, Anthony Sutton, he was asked to fucking join them. He got a letter from them. Say, come and join our gang. Right? And he exposed the Skull and Bones, the ones that get all the sniggers from the members of the Skull and Bones. So when I talk about Knights Templar, Freemasons, Illuminati, just like you said, why would I want to cite the works of their agents who say they don't exist? Surely a researcher of some credibility must already know how to tell what's written by their agents and what isn't. Right? Now, I don't know if you can teach that to people. Maybe you can't. I've never tried. But it's certainly discerning. So your quote, your statement at the beginning that they're talking to airheads. Then my extra, adjunct to that, which is most of the people in the conspiracy movement are airheads. Why not? Go right ahead. Debunk it. Maybe a lot of people will believe it. We have weakened our movement. The people have crawled into it. And they also use this old ad hoc attack. But they never, in all of this hot air, ever tell you what the Illuminati really is. Right? And once you understood that it's connected to the Jesuits and the papacy, well, then, the doors are kicked open and you make your point. But they'll never, and when it comes to that part, there are senior ex-Jesuits like Father Alberto and Father Chiniquet and many others I could mention, Malachi Martin, who confirm it. And they're from within. They're from the highest aspect. But remember, you and I have talked endlessly about the fact that it seems that when a fictional rendering of the very things we're talking about is made, like a Da Vinci Code, love it or hate it or whatever, right? Or a National Treasure, everybody sucks it and goes, that's brilliant. I love that. I can't stop thinking about it.
Because it's a movie.
Yeah, right. Because there's already this dissociation within that these people, the ones who are, on that show and shows like it, the people in the media, they already know that man is dissociated. They already know that he's got this, left hemisphere and right hemisphere. And so when you present something, as they've been doing for centuries, Brotherhood of the Bell, other programs, when it's fictionalized, they also use that methodology. And I can prove it because they do. But on the other side, when the truth is also being spoken, there's a resistance from us. So Freud was wrong, right? Yeah. But the ego is resisting truth. So anybody who is serving the truth knows this. If you're serving mankind, you'll never know it. But if you're serving truth, you understand that there's a resistance. It's a reflex, so you're not even conscious of it. Right. What does that tell us about the truth? But lies you'll suck in. So the obstacles and the challenges of getting truth across to people is the most difficult work that anyone could ever want to do. And then other little things are equally as important, like the fact you just won't pick up a book and go and read it. Anthony Sutton, John Coleman, and the lists I make abundantly available all the time, citing, going breathless citing. Like I said, the Carol Quigleys, men of the highest esteem, people who were who were asked to join Skull and Bones and realized, oh my God, what's going on here? This is the British establishment with its hand, in America, using different fronts, using feminism, using all sorts of charitable orgs, using the schools. Alan Bloom, you don't get any higher. So I make a point of going to their work, right? The Neil Postmans, the Alan Blooms, because then you're sacrosanct. And these people I'm not even interested in what they've got to say, because the only people that they will knock over like a bunch of Skittles are people who actually need to be knocked over because they haven't done their homework. And see, in this movement of truth, if you don't do your homework, I support your execution. I'll pull the fucking switch. You're no friends of mine, and you're no friends of truth. What you are is a fucking disingenuous, ill-informed, undereducated, egomaniacal fucking weasel trying to recast yourself as if, because you couldn't find anything to do. And the internet is now flooded with them, I'm sad to say. So the fight goes on, not just against these people, these detractors, in the mainstream. The fight I'm not going to say it again, you see, we spent too much time on that already. is with people who should not be in this movement, purveying the work that they do. And people can be as offended by that as they like. It doesn't matter. But if you go to the next slide, we'll change tack and look at something vitally important in a more constructive way. Could you read that? It's from the great sociologist, George Simmel.
George Simmel says, the educated person is someone who knows how to find out what he does not know.
Now that sounds really simple, but if you read it again and really mull on it, you'll find out how profound that is. The educated man knows he does not know. Because we're going to do here what those detractors, would never do. They sprout a lot of science and sociology and factoids, right? They don't mean anything. A definition of a conspiracy theorist, the 5% of the ones that remain who are absolutely certain and loyal and true, is that they have understood that they know nothing. Well, Socrates said that, just in case you missed it. The more I know, the more I know nothing. The highest philosophers that have ever existed. People have said that the rest of world philosophy is a footnote to Socrates and to Plato, a footnote. And that man himself said, I know that I know nothing is the basis of all knowledge. Philosophy does not mean the gaining of wisdom. It means the love of wisdom. There's not one in a million people. You will never meet them. You will never meet the lover of wisdom. You will only meet the grabbers of wisdom. The ones who are basking in the power and the glory that wisdom might bring them if they could get hold of it, or at least knowledge. Those you'll meet in the millions. But the lover of Sophia, right? The lover of wisdom, that is the rarest thing on earth and always will be, always has been. So that quote tells you something incredible. And that is, you're already an outsider and you're already claimed your own ground. You already have separated yourself because you must pull back from the canvas in order to even start this process. Not only to know that I don't know, that's quite a step for most people, but then to say, how do I go about getting it? How do I go about finding out? And then that is a process, right? A very specific process of how you do that. And believe me, that will now divide sheep from goats, because in that journey, you will never get to where you need to get unless you also love that process. And you also love the men and women who've gone before you, who can now nourish you with that wisdom. This movement is now crowded with people who have no concern about that. They're just scavengers, they're just looters, and so on. But again, coming back to more of the positive. So the journey that you're now on is itself a living thing. I always call it holy work. And that's, for me, that's what the conspiratorialist is. He's somebody like a Ralph Ellis, who's pulled back from the canvas to doubt some of the most powerful, entrained, right, programmed narratives that we could ever think are there. What skill, what courage it takes to, stand back from that. Look at Jason Giorgiani, what he's done with not only the history of his own country, but of America's politics. Look what I've had to do, in terms of my own country. They'd fucking pillory you if they could, because you've smashed their sacred cause. And all I've done to do it, one of the things that I make sure I do while I'm doing it, is simply to cite, simply to source those who came before me, the higher brows. Doesn't mean I don't have my own take on a lot of their work. Doesn't mean that I agree with them one-to-one on everything they've said. But I still have the normal human respect of, to honor forebears. And I've been doing that since the beginning. You go to superior minds. But the egomaniac can't do that. And even if he does do it, he breaks in the back door, right? He rips off and he plagiarizes and runs laughing down the street, looking over his shoulder. Yeah, like criminals do. Of course you're looking over your fucking shoulder. But truth needs no defense. You go to people with superior credentials. Try to find higher, and if you don't fire, okay, go to the next lot. And then once you've done this, and I've done it, especially as long as I've done, then all this dust throwing from anyone, right? I don't care if they come at me, 1,000-fold more strong than these. It won't matter one bit. In fact, they won't come after me. They have not done so. They go after the low-hanging fruit, the average TV watcher. And see if that TV watcher is just a TV watcher and just watched a couple of, History Channel things or whatever. That's his sum total of his knowledge. Those things are great. I started with all of that. But if you don't then get up at your arse and go and read the greats, then maybe you are the low-hanging fruit that needs to be taken down. You must go, in other words, to the works of the greater men of intelligence, the generals who've written about this, right? and then work to see if their work can be contradicted. So, that's why when you come to my work, I don't care what it is, and you can prove this. Go to any article on the Michael Tsarion website, and you will find it littered with the quotes from statesmen, from deans of colleges, from eminent journalists and writers, from great investigative journalists, and even semi-noble people. So, there is definitely a hierarchy in this movement. I will not set myself up as a spokesman for it because its research is piss poor. If it improves, maybe that'll change. But I'm not waiting. I'm not holding my breath. We are doing what we're doing on Enslaved because it's a lifetime of research, and it's of a superlative nature. And a lot of it is corrective. Like we said about Hegel, and almost everything I do is correcting the myths and the legends, and the doggerel that has crept into this movement. So I'm as much a critic of this movement as anybody from the outside is.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm going to stay that way. It's just sad, and we'll take this group on in a minute, but they do need to be taken on because that's also another level of scum that you're dealing with. But just remember that there's a deep weeding and a deep sort of sanitization needed, even within this so-called alternative whatever movement. It's alternative, all right.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's what I always look at this as, is for me, this has been the ultimate personal development process. It's the same to me as what I do in the martial art world, where you're constantly confronting yourself. You're confronting your own biases. You're confronting the way you see the world, the way you see yourself. And I think that's healthy. Yeah, of course, lots of schizophrenic types of people get in there and they go crazy with it and they're hiding under their stairs and they're wearing the tinfoil hats. But it's interesting how, because of how uncomfortable some of these subjects can be, it's so infinitely easy for people to just go, well, everything to do with anything that's outside of the status quo, what I was taught on television or in school or in church or whatever, anything that's outside of that is unsafe. So therefore, it must be crazy. It must be the fringe. Look how they talk about it. It's the fringe. It's the fringe. Look, I was even quoting the New York Times, where they said more than half, they say it's up to 60% or more of Americans polled for decades believe in conspiracies, specifically political conspiracies. Well, who is responsible for that? Maybe it's the shitty journalism that's being done every day on the news. Maybe it's the horrible education that people are receiving in schools. Maybe it's the lies they're being told from pulpits and in temples and in New Age yoga studios and shit all over maybe there's something else there. Maybe it's the people trying to point the finger that have three fingers pointing back at them that's to blame for all the insanity. So when you weed through, when you go through and you find the needle in the haystack, and that's what I think your work is, Michael, and so many of the people that you brought, to my attention and other people that I've had on this show. When you do find the needle in the haystack, it's almost impossible to go tell all your mates, hey, don't listen to those crazy people, and definitely don't listen to what the media is telling you about this. Come listen to these people. They put the time in. They dedicated 50 years of their life. They were in jail. They were in incarceration to tell you this shit. They wrote this. There's so much more to it, and that's why, Michael, I thought, you're the person to bring in, because you're the one that's dug through all the attics and in the caves and all the manuscripts in the libraries. And you had to do it old school with the microfilm and you didn't have the access to the internet back in the day when you started. You have to cart books around and, so, that's why, like, you have a very unique perspective on this because of the fact that you're not part of some group. You're not starting some new group. You're not trying to lead. In fact, you're the type of person that wants to shun people away. It's like, yeah, okay, get out of it. It's just about the research. And that's what I've always liked about the way that you handle this subject.
I think that about 30% of my research comes from looking at videos or any kind of digital media. You're quite right. At one time, I had 30, before I start lightening the load. And that process started, I can almost give you a date. It started around about 2000, the lightening of the load. I had 36 crates.
Wow.
They were the biggest albatross around my neck. And see, to downsize it took 15 years. The job still wasn't done in 2010 or 11.
Wow.
Right? By around 12, again, roughly, I could sigh. And only the creme de la creme was left. I gave myself an education second to none. Many of these were out of print books that you can't get. So, you know, the story, one day maybe, you know, we'll get to that. But yeah, it was an immense story, an immense filtration system. Because you also need to understand one thing. In that collection, there was, you know, books, collections of books or whatever, that I read 5 times over, like the collected works of, say, Carl Jung or Sigmund Freud or whatever it might be, right? There's numerous examples of this where they were read again, read again, read again, read again, and read again. That's what it took, right? That's not something I wanted to do, right? So it was something that had to, as I digested, the works of Ayn Rand, and you know, there's many examples of this, as I say, books that were gone over and over and over again. So that by the time this career, you know, arose or whatever you want to call it, you know, the first Atlantis book, it's appendices, basically the whole Atlantis book was in here. You know, and I could even cite the books later when, you know, it was a bit rough around the edges, so I had to fix things, but most of it was from in here, right? And there's witnesses to this where I could just narrate it. And then, you know, okay, that came from William Bramley. That one's a quote from Brinsley Lepore Trench. That's from Blavatsky. You know, got, you know, a couple of % wrong. We had to fix it later. But the bulk of it, you know, and it went on like that. And that's because of a thoroughly researched person who had done this, you know. And I assumed when I walked into this movement that you know, and by the way, for the very first group, it was like that. I must say that the very first talks done in 2000, and the people who backed me there were authentic.
You talking about like Conspiracy Con and some of those guys?
Yes.
Some of those conferences?
The UFO Expo, yeah, but Victoria Jack, she just sadly passed away. So, you know, I've been thinking about her this year. She was the first one to offer me the talks. Brian Hall, those guys were solid. And many of the people around them were solid, right? So after 2002, after I, you know, stopped working with them and want to go off with other people, every single time I was ripped off, royally so. So apart from that little debut, which was wonderful, it actually encouraged me to continue. You know, your Dr. Roger Lears and so many great people. You know, the Lloyd Pye, they all came around me. You know, Glenn Kimball, a whole bunch of Richard Hoagland, a lot of people who came around me at that time and really supported me. Jim Mars, you know, the list goes on of the people who actively and openly supported me. That's why I continued going, right? Michael Cremo will be another one, right? So the thing is that then what happened right after that, I think the gigs that I got directly after that, I was ripped off until I stopped doing it around 2011. And even that one was a rip-off. And the one before in 2010. And the one before and the one before and the one before. So I am the deepest critic of these fucking people, right? And I wish to God I could say more, but I just can't, because the time and the energy has been taken up in producing the work, which to me had overarching. So no matter what my Irish said to go, you know, take it on, I couldn't. And to this very day, I can't. But the good side of it is, by just holding back on that, I've been able to produce superlative works, you know, and I have to just put my faith in that. Yeah, because otherwise the time and energy would have been wasted chasing after these, you know, snakes is basically what they are.
Yeah, and you know what? People, you always get those people coming in where anybody you mentioned, they're like, you know, any of the people you mentioned, all these books that you've collected and gone through so many times. I have my list of those too, where I've got all the highlighting and the little tabs, and you dive in. They need to understand that comes from a passion. That comes from you've talked about the difference between occupation, vocation. This is a vocation. This is part of your journey and my journey, and it means something. And what I see is a lack of care on behalf of so many people, especially when you talk about it. Everybody's got an opinion, but nobody has an educated fucking opinion. And that's the problem. And the reason they don't have an educated opinion is because they don't care enough to have one. It's easier to just read a little snippet of a clip that you watched on a YouTube video or scroll down your Facebook feed and go, oh, I'm going to share that article. I didn't even read it, you know, or come and comment on something. You didn't even read it. You have no idea what you're doing, and come in there like, this is happening all over in all the research community. So this is something in human nature that you have to navigate through no matter what subject you're trying to research, let alone probably the most explosive subject, which is this.
That's it. One of the first quotes I put out back in 2000, and I used it extensively. It's still on one of my websites. I don't know which one. And that's a quote from Alexander Pope. Drink deep or touch not the Pyrenean spring. A little knowledge is a dangerous thing. So he summarizes that the stream of knowledge is sacred. So either drink deep from it or don't touch it, because it's a dangerous thing. And we'll bring up bizarre things. One of them is this, muck slinging that you get from mainstream types, but we kind of know that, right? And anyway, anyone who's crossed the Rubicon, like I said, and has studied it, they're immune to that because on their shelf is the masters. Why, after reading Smedley Butler or John Stormer, right? Or Anthony Sutton, would I care who is throwing stones? Why? These are the masters. These are the saviors. These are the men who saw what was going on behind the scenes. Trust in them. It doesn't matter what anybody tinkering about in their garage or skateboarding down the street or hacky-sacking around with their little fucking dreads says about it. Some Bitcoin, some Occupy movement, dickhead, right? You just go, okay, I'll take it on board. Thanks very much. Gotta go. Right? It's insane. It's, 50. It used to be that from the dawn of time, 50% of everything the human race did was preposterous. Now it's 95. Accept it. Find your job then is to find that 5% and sign in. Mark Twain said it, when you realize that the whole world is full of fools, all the mysteries of life stand explained. He said something like, when you realize all the world is mad, there are no mysteries. It's all explainable. But then when you get down to the next level, you discover the Krishnamurtis, the Conan Doyles, that say that only by the painstaking elimination of the untrue does the truth stand forth. You don't want to know the journey that sends you on. And so it's better to shout, better to cluster, better to clamor, right? Better to go berserk, better to sign on to some nonsense than do what that says, because it is painstaking. It's totally apophatic. And that sends you, whether you like it or not, into a conspiratorial mode. So these detractors, and we'll get specifically to the articles, I've got them line by line. I want to take them apart in just a minute. But basically, you've already kind of done it, because what they never explain to you is that the conspiratorialist is the one who really doesn't conspire with others. He doesn't conspire with, he's a loner. He's an outsider. Right? And if he walks with somebody else, it's as a fair friend down a straight road, that it's just a conversation. He is really a thinker. And unlike these, weasels that I'm talking about, he tries to get his arms around as much information, but he also wants to find the thread that links all the beads together. You know what I mean? So he has to be very, very open-minded, and he has to listen to all sorts of voices from all different walks of life. And he must not sign on, and become a partisan, right? And in this way, you see, and again, unfortunately, as much as I love many of them, don't you see how many Christian thinkers there are within this movement? But see, what they don't understand and never will understand is that very partisan allegiance absolutely blinds them from the truth. And people can get as offended by that as they like. Say you've signed on for the New Age paradigm. I'm sorry, but you're blinded. If you sign on for atheism, flat earth, or whatever, right? Catholicism, I'm against the Protestants. No, the Protestants are against the Catholics. The Jews are the Palestinians, right? The right against the left. Now we've got that polarization coming again. But see, the moment that you sign on for any paradigm, you're not a conspiratorialist. So again, they can shoot all the bullets, these detractors. Who are they hitting, actually? Who are they after? They're not after you. They're after me. They're after the people who are really walk the talk. The rest of you don't even qualify, so you're bulletproof by your ignorance.
That's well said.
You're safe by your fucking stupidity.
Yeah.
You'll be the one carrying the buckets of soup to the real inmates. You're just the fucking baldricks. I know you're big in your fucking heads. No, you're just a fucking, you're just a cannon fodder. But they're not really going after you. They're going after a specific kind of lover of wisdom. So I will not equate. See, I'm not even going to equate myself with the rest of the crowd who thinks that they're under attack. You're not under attack. You're too fucking hopeless. You're small fish. Try 30 years of this, like I say. It's an intense journey that nobody can ever understand. Right? And so they know that that person is approaching wisdom. And therefore that person, right, unlike the rest of the herd, is a hater of wisdom. All the world that you look around, you'll understand in one way. They're misophists. They hate wisdom. Anybody ever heard that? Anyone tell you that before? So they cover that up by a clever, artificial interest, superficial flirtation with knowledge, as you find in this movement. You think I'm fooled by that? It's the same thing that exists in academia. In fact, it's very similar to that. Right? That is a imitation. The real person who's, walks his talk does not get fooled by that at all. He can see the genuine fake. But you will never be able to see the genuine fake if you don't know what the genuine article is. So you have to have held a Fabergé egg. You have to have held a Ming vase. You have to fucking hold the Tsarina's emeralds and lovingly understood them and looked at them and weighed the beauty and saturated yourself in that beauty. Then the chewing gum version, the spinner rack shrink wrapped Toys R Us Radio Shack version, just for what it is. Hey, you might even use it on occasion. It might be all right. You might even tolerate it. But you'll never ever convince you that that's the real thing. And that is the kind of person that is the real threat. So if they even in their statements that say they're a growing number, I've got quotes from, I think it was actually from William Casey, another quote which you don't have right here. Maybe I'll post it below, or post it somewhere on the Facebook page or whatever, that actually tells you that we are worried because there's so many of them. We can't let them be awakened. Very similar to the Brzezinski quote, which he made in his own words. We have it on Architects of Control. An underlying fear that these guys are going to rise, right? And that they do in fact constitute to that degree a threat, right? These leaders, these people have actually said that. But that can fool a lot of people. You've got to also realize that no, they're after a certain different kind of individual who now, because there are means of, broadcasting it, they can in fact reach the millions. So shadow banning is their most recent attack on us, right? And on others. You see, not wanting to help you get your voice out and so on. So, and they won't stop. But what they don't realize is that, we're invulnerable. We're not going to back down. So game on.
Bring it.
Can we take a little 2-minute break? I want to come back.
Yeah, sure.
To
absolutely.
address these people much more succinctly.
Absolutely. Take a break.
Okay, good man. All right, be right back.
Cool. Wow, what an opener. And guys, we're just getting warmed up. We're going to keep this stream going. As Michael said, I think he gave me a slideshow. We still have 10 more slides. Plus, we're going to be going through a whole bunch of the actual content in the articles. And I did put the articles, if you followed this link on my Way the Truth Warrior Facebook page, I did put the articles there, just a couple of them that we're going to address. These are some recent articles, talking about this whole FBI document about how they're putting conspiracy theorists on the radar because they're worried about domestic terrorism. And then obviously they've had psychologists come in from Harvard now to comment on the psychology of the average conspiracy theorist. And so we're going to go through and dissect that. But really happy to see everybody here, man. The chat is hopping. I should scroll. Oh my goodness. You guys you got a little side conversation happening. Love to see it. Welcome everybody. And the BB blog is saying, thanks very much. Oh, you're very welcome. This is a passion of mine. And I know I have a lot of friends and family of my own that will always look sideways at me because I cover these types of subjects. And I'm totally fine with that. And it's all good. But I'll tell you this. Before you try to take shots at somebody, you should hear them out. That's what I try to do. And I've done that on both sides of these arguments when it comes to all of these things. I've spent countless hours listening to debates, listening to mainstream articles, reading, what's his name, Jonathan Kay or whatever the hell, who wrote the book on how conspiracy theories are all crazy and all these people. I read just as much of their stuff as I do the alternative thinkers because I know there are valid points on both sides when it comes to looking at this. But the one thing that always gets left, and even by people that are out there, let me just pause for a second. the whole Epstein thing, okay? I'm not going to get into the details of the case, and nobody really even knows, but when it first started coming out, all these alternative thinkers and commenters and people from the mainstream, people from different circles were commenting on the Epstein case, and I think pretty much everybody thought it was a conspiracy. Correct me if I'm wrong. Like pretty much everybody, even celebrities were tweeting about it. Trump was even saying stuff about it. We had commentary in the news here in Canada about it. I was talking to lots of friends people who they don't really look into any of this stuff. And they're like, yeah, that seems a little suspicious. I think there's something going on with this Epstein thing. And there was one comment that stood out from all these commenters on this subject. And that is, well, I'm not really much of a conspiracy theorist, or I don't really believe in those conspiracy theories. However, in this case, I think it could be. And I'm sitting there going, you know what? It doesn't matter if you believe in conspiracies. Conspiratorialists believe in you, not having the brain cells to rub together to go and actually look at the facts and look at it from a very objective point of view and discover what's true. And as Michael was saying, to go through that process of negating what's not true so you can find out what's true. Now, with a lot of these specific instances, and that's not what Michael and I are going to be here to cover, and I don't spend a lot of time covering those specific, did they kill Princess Diana? Who killed JFK? Is Bigfoot real? All this kind. They're fun. There's stuff that I do. There's even shows that I'm a part of that cover some of these things, and I think it's fun, and that's like a hobby, but it's not even something that I'm as committed to. This type of information, the real shit, the real stuff that'll keep you up at night, the real facts of history, the criminal history of mankind that would blow any sense of the ponies and rainbows mentality that we see running around right now. Of just, if we just all get together and start singing in a circle and doing more drumming and doing yoga on the lawn of the parliament buildings or lighting fires and all this stuff. If we just did more of that, the world would just come together and be one. No, we're talking about the real stuff here. And that's what I've always wanted to know. I've wanted to know the truth, not the truth I want to be true, not the truth you want to be true, the truth as it is. And when you go to that path, I'm sorry, you're not going to be here for very long before you start to develop a conspiratorial mind, because you realize humans are conspiratorial by nature. It's part of our psychology, as that guy was pointing out, except he was trying to spin it the other way. That same psychology can be easily flung back in their own faces to say, no, listen, this is nothing new. Like, you can go back through, if you just open up some history books and study them for more than a few minutes, you'll realize that we have different groups with competing interests that are willing to cheat. God forbid people are willing to cheat in order to win the game. Is that so hard to talk about? Is that so controversial? Is that the thing that's making everybody squeamish when they're talking about legitimate conspiracies? Like, well, I don't want to be shunned by all of society and lose my 2 million YouTube subscribers by saying that I believe in a conspiracy. I'm not actually a conspiracy theorist, but in this case, I think there might be something else to it. And that's what makes me sit back and go, what the hell? You sound ridiculous. You sound ridiculous. You sound worse than your enemy. You sound, it's unbelievable. It's like every single day. I went to CBC, which is it's like Canada's CNN. And by the way, CBC gets government funding thanks to Trudeau. But anyways, you scroll down and they have all these articles. And one of the articles and one of the commenters in there was from the CBC in Canada. And they were, trying to debunk conspiracy theorists. Conspiracy theorists are crazy and they're domestic terrorists and they're a threat and all this kind of stuff. But then every second article, if you put in conspiracy on the CBC website, you'll see, father charged with conspiracy against his son or something. And or this person, conspiracy of fraud. They'll put up, this big pharmaceutical company was caught conspiring to commit fraud and put known, what was it? They were putting all kinds of fentanyl in their products and selling them knowingly all over the place. They were tried by a court of law and found guilty of conspiracy. So on one hand, the same agency is sitting there going, well, you're capable of conspiracy, and some big CEOs are capable of conspiracy, and some of these people over here are capable of conspiracy, but those crazy conspiracy theorists are just a bunch of tinfoil hat wearing schizophrenics. You're like, oh, come on. Like, seriously? So when you see that cognitive dissonance and when you see them putting it up in your face, you have to know they're not that dumb. They know what they're doing, and there's something more to it. So anyways, that's my little rant. Welcome back, Michael. If you had any comments, throw them at me, or if you want to continue with the slides, let me know what you want to do next.
Yeah, we can go to the slide. It's just, but what you said is so correct. It's a new blood sport. It always has been, right?
Yeah.
It's not against conspiracy people. It's about outsiders.
Right.
It is territorialism. It is academic grandstanding. They've got the, credential or whatever. So then you get into their psyche. You do a Columbo on them. You go to people of higher credibility.
Just one more thing.
Yeah, just
Columbo.
one more thing. Right? Don't let them off the hook. You do this. You go to people of illustrious credentials, people from the inside, people who have written the memoirs and the journals, the books exposing the conspiracy. And once, like I said, once you've done that, you are absolutely sovereign. No force on earth. And they know that now more and more people, right, are doing exactly this. They're afraid of us, right? They're afraid of those people turning to this great wisdom, which has been happening more and more. And so there's many, like you say, many ways of naysaying you. By, as I said, trying to limit you to some sort of subcultural group, and then you sort of do feel a bit like, oh, maybe I'm a bit, yeah, I'm kind of lonely, it is a bit difficult to be an outsider. See, so they hope that they can waylay you and make you change your mind, but the thing that needs to be done is what we're really doing here, which is then to take on their critiques, word by word, and basically try to show how utterly disingenuous what they're about, what they're doing is. So, maybe you can turn to the first slide. These will be from the 2 articles you sent me. And if you post those articles below, then people will be really easy for them to follow.
You're talking about this one here?
Into. Just read that. Yeah, is that the... Yeah, that's the one.
In January, YouTube announced it would gradually start reducing recommendations of borderline content and content that could misinform users in harmful ways.
It's censorship, right? Everybody should be able to see that. There's not one person listening to us. If they're really reasonable and if they're sane, they should see that now what has happened is censorship of the worst kind has been authenticated. That's from those 2 articles. This is from the most trending stuff. Learn how to deconstruct and decode what they're saying.
Yeah, this is one of the articles here from Science Alert talking about these are the kinds of people who are more likely to believe in political conspiracies.
Go to the next slide, because you'll see something very interesting now. Go to that second one and just read it.
The good thing is people can do this on their own by proactively seeking out and exposing oneself to information and perspectives that challenge their beliefs. One stands to gain a more objective and credible understanding of the world. Well, there you go.
Go back to the first one again. That's the same people. Look how they contradict themselves. In this related article, read that again.
In January, YouTube announced it would gradually start reducing recommendations of borderline content and content that could misinform users in harmful ways.
Is there something missing that Tsarion needs to further underline? There's only 2 articles. There can't be that many words in those articles, and they're already. This is the final statement. What you just read there is the final paragraph. This one, no, not the one you read now, but that second slide is the final paragraph. So the first part contradicts the latter. First, they're telling you to avoid knowledge that they don't authenticate, and then their final recommendation is ever so glorious, ever so diplomatic and generous of them to admit that you need to go and do research of your own. Well, which one fucking is it then, you intellectual assholes?
Exactly.
Right, these are the ones with the fucking parking space at Cornell. Yeah. They're so full of themselves, they can't even write. Also, in that statement, how would we put it? Almost everybody who has an intellect already does what they're talking about. Go read it again. Read that last halfway through that second quote.
The second one there. The good thing is people can do this on their own by proactively seeking out and exposing oneself to information and perspectives that challenges their beliefs. Yeah. One stands to gain a more objective view of the world.
Right. They have to instruct you. Don't put the cat in the microwave. Right. I think I understand. People already do this. As it's called a natural program. From school onwards, from your parents' insistence to learn more, from a natural tendency of consciousness, they're trying to get behind it and force you to do it. What kind of fucking, this is called the ivory tower mentality of people who've been spinning around the room in their intellectual ivory towers, who've forgotten the basics. Yes, people do learn and people do develop without any books or assistance or any schools. That's how we got to where we are. So don't you see then what's really hidden? Why I started with these two slides is this. Don't you see that what is hidden behind their stupid fucking facile rhetoric is the prohibition against, or let's say it more clearly, they're pathologizing a natural capacity. When they've got to explain what you should do on this parental big brother, right, authoritarian mode, they're actually saying that that which is natural to you, a natural capacity, is to be pathologized. That's the hidden message behind it. What's the subtextual meaning? Obviously, it should be clear that from statements like that, they are setting themselves up as the dictators. It's purely Orwellian dictatorship. Because don't you see by that comment that they are setting themselves up to say to you, we have to tell you what is enough learning and what isn't. Go back to the first one and read it, just to make this point. It's crucial.
YouTube announced it would gradually start reducing recommendations of borderline content and content that could misinform users in harmful ways.
Yeah. So who is setting themselves up as the authority to know what will harm you in ways and what won't?
Yes, that's it. That's it.
I'll tell you who. The authority is doing it. There's only one rule. Obey the rules. There's only one ring to rule them all. The criminal determines the type of investigation you're going to do to uncover him.
Exactly.
It's like saying, and one of them actually waxed lyrical about psychology, right? The guy on the TED who couldn't even get his terms right. This guy's using this word, throwing this word at psychology, right? But the same thing applies. Where is the authenticated psychological technique to show whose mind is grasping reality and whose isn't? And who is employing that? Right, some behaviorist? These people signed on for behaviors for the best part of 50 years. A thing that is so bogus that a retard could see through it. These are the same people. They're authenticating neuroscience and quantum science. These are the same detractors who are now telling you that they've got some psychological means or technique. I'd like to know what it is. Yes, I'll tell you what it is. The one the criminal favors to substantiate their narrative. Of course, why could I be so dumb as not to realize? They are the authority. They are the government. Right? They will tell you what there is to believe and how much of it you shall believe at any given time. How wide the doors of your mind will be open this day and what the rule is tomorrow. And we've got psychological tests. And they're meant to scare you with these terms. Like I said, they come up with their own talismanic terms. You see, to make you think that, oh my God, I'm having my, knuckles wrapped. How I dare think out the box. And you see, the crazy thing is, they actually do have a manual. It's called a DSM. It's the 5th version of the volume that will do exactly this, to pathologize the whole of normal behavior. Predicted by Freud, predicted by Jung, predicted by Thomas Szasz, and every of the greatest minds with degrees up the gazoo. Far more eminently qualified men than these twogs. Far more eminent. They knew it was coming down the tubes. It's the Orwellian state. It doesn't mean that psychological test has any meaning, especially if it was dreamed up with by psychological constitutional inferiors. If a psychological recalcitrant, recidivist, or regressive came up with the test, it doesn't authenticate the test. And just because it's got the stamp of approval of every Ivy League college in the world still doesn't mean it's legitimate at all, because in 10 years it'll be thrown out again. If you've studied the history of any of these sciences, you'll know that every 5 years they had to redact the whole goddamn thing. The edifice was so fucking porous. Go to the next one. The third one.
Oh, yeah, this one. People who overestimate their political understanding. That's what they're accusing us as. The findings suggest, so they're talking about this study they did. The findings suggest that people who overestimate their political knowledge are more likely to live under the illusion that specific individuals or groups are conspiring to influence global decisions, events, and outcomes.
Yeah.
So
again, it's a natural tendency. It's a natural tendency to say, up Periscope, I want to look at what I see around me. And I want to rationally discover, see, the chorus of voices, the madness and the cacophony is not in the people they're talking about. It's in them and their media. You said this earlier yourself.
Yeah.
It's a response. Conspiracyism, or the conspiratorial mindset, is a mindset that is trying to make sense of insanity. But the insane are ruling the institution. They are more mad. Right? And it's an argument that only stands if you pathologize natural capacities. It's just as simple as that. There's no easier way to say it. It is extreme totalitarianism of the intellectual kind. Go to the next one.
It says our findings might suggest that showing people the limitations of their understanding can lead to more informed, evidence-based opinions and beliefs. So there you go.
Right. So who's the high priest? See, it sounds kind of rational. Hey, if you're skimming through that, it might sound very like a benefactor is speaking to you. But these are not the benefactors. These are the fucking wardens of the prison.
He's the last people.
They're the sheepdog. They're the last people. These are the ones who created Soviet Russia. Yeah. And the gulags at Solzhenitsyn. Oh, Solzhenitsyn, talking of eminent people who might, suddenly eclipse these idiots. So, but we have to ask the question, is it rational? Is conspiracy material not evidence-based? They made a statement there, right? That is trying to differentiate between evidence-based information and data and theorems and proofs and stuff, right? They're looking for proofs. Yes, but why do you assume in a wholesale way that all conspiracy, or you're implying is what they're really doing, the conspiracy information, say as a G. Edward Griffin or Eustace Mullins' entire life work, is not evidence-based? Sure, the man was in court hundreds of times watching how the rape of justice takes place. The man researched the medical profession to the nth degree. That's why he wrote Murder by Injection. And on I could say. He studied the leading families of the world. That's why he could write The World Order. How dare these pisspots come along and then tell you that it's not evidence-based? Well, then you're saying that what Carol Quigley was like some eminent professor fucking emeritus from bloody Princeton or somewhere like that?
It's Georgetown University.
So what is... Yeah, and of course, clearly anybody... Oh, Georgetown, yeah. So clearly somebody can read that and say, oh, I see what they're trying to do. They're helping the idiot learn what he's meant to learn. It's undisguised authoritarianism. And if he doesn't pass the test and jump through our hoops, we're going to demote him. We're going to subculturize him. We're going to say that he definitely needs instruction. They're going there. They're going there. They're going there.
Yeah,
they will literally have you locked up.
Re-education
yes,
camps.
It's exactly been predicted. Yep.
Yeah.
H.G. Wells was a wet dream of these people, right? And they're already more than halfway there with their psychiatry. We'll be doing shows on Unslaved about that. Go to the next slide. To show that, to back that up, to substantiate that.
Goes on to say the good thing is people can do this on their own by proactively seeking out and exposing oneself to information and perspectives that challenges their beliefs. One stands to gain a more objective and credible understanding of the world.
meaning see eye to eye with their controllers. It's called entrainment. What this disguises is that there is one perspective to see, and it's only one is authenticated. Like I said, obey all the rules. What that means unpacked is you will see as we see, and we will clockwork orange you fucking to death and medicate you and probe you and chemically lobotomize you until you do see as we do. But actually, it's even simpler than that. The conspiratorialist is doing that. Exactly what that quote said. He is already doing that. So these people have a kind of a attraction-repulsion relationship with their enemy. And when you unpack that, what that means is that we have not only won, we are the triumphant. Our colors are flying. We won the day. They lost. And that's true. Since the 80s and onwards, again, I restricted to that 5%. But see, the statement still holds that the conspiratorial mindset has won out. We have trumped them in every way. Loads and loads of information, like I listed off, about 9/11 and Pizzagate and everything else, is all verified. It's all true. Whistleblowers from then have proved it to be accurate. And so in some left-handed way, these establishment people actually envy us. I'll stand by that. Go to the next slide.
That's interesting.
Yeah, in a left-handed way.
Yeah. For many members of the public, particularly individuals who have benefited from existing social and political arrangements, these developments and changes are quite threatening.
This is beyond belief. This is beyond belief, this statement. But again, when you read the subtext, you get the point I'm trying to make. They're actually admitting in this statement that people benefit from the traditional life and the traditional outlook. Go back and see that I'm right. Go back and read it one more time.
For many members of the public, particularly individuals who have benefited from existing social and political arrangements, these developments and changes are quite threatening.
Right. So I say to them, thanks for admitting that the old traditional ways actually worked. Because on another bad day, they wouldn't even admit that. So they've actually made a concession here. This is what's called a concession. They've conceded that for a great many people, the system as we know it works just fine and it allows you to benefit. Thanks for admitting that. That's a good concession. So
because
why
every other article, every other news is to come out and attack any kind of tradition or civilization or culture or any of that kind of stuff.
Right. And therefore, would it not then be, I ask after reading that, is it not then, so say you're even talking about only that group that does benefit. Yes, but then at least for that group, isn't it quite logical and rational to object to the ruin of that system? You see, what they're doing is so utterly ill thought out. But the very point they're making, the bigger point, the more obvious point, is actually demonstrably false. Put it back up and I'll read it. The result...
Oh, wait, sorry, that's the next one. I'll go back here. There you go.
Yeah, for many members of the public, particularly individuals who've benefited from existing structures, right? These developments, the ones that they're talking about that discohese people and confuse people and bamboozle people, so they've got to become conspiracy theorists. No, they're admitting here that there was a benefit. But they do this by contrasting it with modern discohesion in society. You can come back to me, right? They put this, they're desperately, the way I read it anyway, is that they're desperately trying to repicture in their own psychotic way history. Where there was this traditional, fixed, patriarchal, static sort of traditions, how horrible, right? Stayed, all of that. And now there's this more pluralistic, multicultural, fluid reality. And again, it has the ring of truth on the surface, but it's absolutely bollocks. Because you only have to cast your mind back to the basic history to know that no, that is not true. There was nothing stable. Take the founding of America alone. You call it fixed traditions? That when Puritans landed on the shores of America and fought through the jungles and the Native American Indians, you call the War of Independence and the Civil War and all that was there to form, the United States of America? The Mexican Wars and the War of 1812 and Christ knows what else, and all the fighting of disease, you know, and the setting up of the docks and all the rest of it, and all the multicultural fighting that was in, you know, in those years, and the building of the great city. What the hell is fixed about that? In the past, the past was more troublesome than anything they say in their articles about now. Go back and read it. They're trying to tell you that our society is much more fragmented and that destabilization is the reason for conspiratorialism to arise. False. The history, as we go back further, is more and more fragmented, not less. Much more destabilized. Poverty was real poverty. The privileged white man didn't exist. Just as simple as that. You didn't have all the protections. You didn't have all the, accoutrements of civilization to protect anyone. It was infinitely more destabilized, far more treacherous.
Constant threat of
So
war.
we even lived through the Cold War. Good point.
Yeah.
Right. The Cold War, you know, the whole thing about atomic. We're not getting into judgment. I'm just citing destabilizing things, the Cold War and endless amounts of debt. We had the depressions and all. Come on, I don't need to explain it over and over again. How can these twogs who've never left the fucking car park of their collegiates, who know nothing about except swatting a ball in the fucking squash court and jumping through hoops and reading Karl Marx? Look, see, what I do is I look for that which is not said. It's apophatic, right? How can they present a picture of America in the way they do and then contrast it with this now destabilized, fragmented, the disenfranchisement and all blah, 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 blah. What the fuck are you talking about? You just have to think about what the few things I pointed out. And other meltdowns. In the same line, he goes on it. We don't have it, but in the same line, he talks about the unequal values. That the conspiracy people, their value systems are very, very different. Because values are broken down or whatever. From these old world values and whatever. But what he doesn't say is that in order to have values at all, you have to have inequality. So it's another moot point he's making. Right? There can only be a thing you value if you know what to value it against. So anytime a fucking plonker like these guys brings up the question of value as if to benefit their argument, it's false by the way they present it. Right? Because there are no such thing as equal values. That's what he was read it yourself. You'll see he was intoning the fact that the conspiracy people have different values. Yeah, you have to have different values. You have to have all sorts of unequal values. Otherwise, you can't have value.
Yeah, exactly.
Otherwise, how could you tell a higher value from a lower? How could you tell a goodly value from an evil one? So again, these posers, right? Go to the next one.
So this 113. Right, so it continues to say, the results suggest that people who feel threatened by America's changing values, both culturally, socially, and ideologically, are more likely to be irrationally skeptical of those in power. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah. Changing values. Culturally, how they measure for that anyway is also another story.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I don't think you can measure values, right? So not in the way they're hoping to do. So it's really an apologist for the state, right? It's really an apologist from the state here that you're dealing with. What they're doing is they're resisting people who are finding value in a valueless culture that they created. You mentioned this earlier. It's the petri dish from which conspiratorialism arises. Is toxic, is foul, is vapid, is contradictory, and is ultimately valueless. So what a conspiratorialist is doing is seeking now to find a new set of values that religion did not supply because it's a bunch of mind control, and that the Orwellian educational systems do not supply. And these guys don't like it. They don't like you seeking out values on your own, ones that are really unique. And they're trying to say that it's bad. And the only way they can say it's bad for you to do that is because you're now a threat to the state. Right? You're skeptical of those in power. Fucking right, I'm skeptical of those in power. You're fucking insane to not be. But these are apologists, so you can see their apology here. Her meaning, this was written by a woman, right? She says, she's basically saying, never be skeptical of those in power. That's what's being said in that statement. Never be skeptical of those in power. Oh, right. I won't be then. Let them go on undermining the whole of America and undermining me. I won't say a word, and I'll go to the slaughter without a murmur. The people who realize agent provocateur, fifth columnist, right? Apologist for the state. They've got to realize what's going on. And the media is the greatest. David Rockefeller thanked them. We'll dig out the fucking quote and put it there. It's in my Atlantis book. I've used it multiple times. Thank you to the Washington Post and the press. He's at a press conference. Thank you for doing the bidding of your fucking masters. Your sadomasochistic masters. So that we could move forward with our socialistic agendas, while you distracted everybody with love scenes and car chases and other shite. They're doing the same today. It didn't, just because he made that speech doesn't mean he wrapped it up. He didn't say, we're over now, we've done it. It's continue continue the process. Maintain. Well done. Carry on, lads. Go to the next one.
We found that when one...
This is a quote from that vitriol.
Yeah,
this is a quote from that vitriol character.
His last name is actually Vitriol. That's hilarious. Okay, so we found that when one feels that society's fundamental defining values are under siege, Vitriol says, it is a strong predicator of a general tendency towards conspiracy thinking and endorsement of both ideological and non-ideological conspiracy theories.
Right, so what is ideological then? What is ideological? And actually, it's completely wrong anyway. But it's wrong in this state that the conspiracy theorist's reaction isn't against what he says it is. It's against him. It's against the establishment. They're the ones besieging us. He's a spokesman. He says under siege, right? Values are under siege. Let's take a wild fucking guess and find out who's besieging our values. It's called the establishment.
Exactly.
If you can ever catch anyone of any of them from the dawn of time upholding the people's value. What did Tolstoy say again? You saw it in the beginning. The government is an institution that does violence to the rest of us. Find me an example where it held up rational, logical, human values. This man is insane. He's going to end up in a straitjacket. We found that when one feels that society's fundamental defining values are under siege, he hasn't found out that they're under siege, but he gets the prime time slots. Your masters are the fucking ones that have put us under siege, you stupid plonker. Go back to the drawing board. You see, but it's entrainment. They've been entrained. Entrained means that, two clocks that are moving on separate, tickers, right? Start going like that in a room. Do you know that actually happens? They can put two grandfather clocks in a room, right? And they're set differently, and their pendulums are swinging totally independently. After a day or two, it is a scientific fact. And I'm not going to get into all the science of why it is. Somebody better than me could do that. They start swinging together. Women, 3 or 4 of them in a room or a commune, and very soon they're breathing and their menstrual cycles synchronize. You think the government's missed that? You think that the fucking people who control your every fucking neuronal movement, right, who control you utterly, have omitted that fact, don't know about it? But the entrainment is with their will, you fucking arseholes, right? You are like that, with their will. And sometimes it breaks down. The wheel comes off. Well, they got to set the clocks again, right? They got to create the environment and the electromagnetism and the gravity and all to get you back in the entrainment. And certain things, just natural things, there's a natural instinct of individuality within you. I know it's not very strong, but it is there. Take my word for it. Sometimes, will trigger something that sort of fucks you over. And you start independent thinking, number 6. You become unmutual and disharmonious. So what happens? They got to get you back into entrainment. How come people don't know about that? That's provable fact. And Charles T. Tart, far more eminent than they are, and Rupert Sheldrake, need we say it again, far more academically eminent than they are. And I could add Ian McGilchrist and a whole line of other people, Robert Lanza and all the rest, goes on and on and on, have proven it. Bruce Lipton we had on the show, right? Others have proven it without doubt. This entrainment actually exists.
What about even the Milgram experiments? I mean, they've invested all kinds of money, the CIA and the NSA and these intelligence communities. They got these Dr. Jose Delgado type guys. They got all these guys. Jim Keith goes into this in his book about mind control. And they sat people down. It's the whole electrode thing where after a certain amount of peer pressure, someone will actually hit the buzzer on you because they're told to. Like, it's like... It's something out of a science fiction movie, yet they invested money. And you think they just kind of wrap that up and put it in a classified file somewhere and they never use that shit against you? Are you kidding me?
They're using it constantly.
Jesus.
The Ash test. That's our word, the Milgram and the Ash, right?
Right.
Institutionalization. That's entrainment. And entrainment is the order of the day. So when a conspiracy person puts the focus on that, as many of the genuine ones do, that's fascinating. But you'll never hear anything that we're talking about revealed by these people. And so I'm telling you that they envy us. The research is of such profundity of kicking through the doors of religion and institutionalized organizations of education, of all sorts of subject matter, hidden secrets, you name it, all that stuff that comes under the good conspiracy. These people are in deep awe of it. And attraction and repulsion. They wish they could have done it. They wish the mainstream. In fact, I predicted many, many years ago, and I've proven right, that the mainstream would systematically trawl all the conspiracy movement and start putting it out in the mainstream. The people who've been following my work religiously for years know that I've said that multiple times. And I meant it then, and I was proven right. Go to the next one. See more of their duplicity.
The research is supported by the previous studies that have linked conspiracy theories and narcissism, which is a grandiose view of one's own talents and one's place in the world. Jesus, who's the narcissist?
Now, this is where they made... Yeah, but they made a big mistake here. Remember I told you that every time they dip into psychology, narcissism is a term used in psychology.
Right.
Every time they dip into psychology to ratify establishment ideology, it doesn't serve them. His master should have told him, don't use psychology. Because first of all, narcissism it's not incorrectly defined, but it's very poorly defined there. So again, the term narcissism, which really alludes to a condition of self-loathing or self-hate, isn't defined properly. When it is, he is identifying it with its fallacy, which is love, self-love. You see that? Go back one more time and read it. He's equating just the last part even.
Conspiracy theories and narcissism. Yeah, which is a grandiose view of one's own talents and one's place in the world.
That's half false. Because he is equating narcissism with a false, traditional, authenticated, and wholly false premise that narcissism is akin to self-love. He calls it grandiosity. But it's wrong. Anyone who really knows the truth, and I'm talking about the men who really studied and the women who studied true narcissism, the ones who studied it, and this includes Dr. Hare and Checkley, but others before them, they absolutely know, Martha Stout, that it's akin to self-hate. I mean, that's just a fact. You can't doubt it. He doesn't mention that. So he's misdefining. This is the way they do this rhetorical sophistry. He misdefines a condition and then links that misdefined condition with conspiracy people to demonize them. Yeah. But that would mean that you would now have to prove. See, here's the thing you have to do to prove them wrong. You would have to show that he has actually gone around and done a test to show that every conspiracy aficionado is self-hating. Well, we know that's impossible. It's not even a test you could do. So again, as I say, is negated. It's pointless. But he doesn't mind that it's pointless. He just wants to get you to associate conspiratorial thinking with narcissism. There is no such connection. However, the only connection that there is that this word narcissism works talismanically, like we mentioned earlier. It is one of these words that you can defame anyone, anytime with. In fact, it reminds me, remember Vladimir Lenin, the head of one of the founders of communism, he said, call your enemy what you are and always tell the exact opposite of the truth. That's what they're doing there. They are the narcissists, the establishment demagogues with their cigars and their fucking brandy glasses, right? The ones on the yachts and dancing on their desks. They are the narcissists. They are the self-haters, because all the pathology of our world, see if these twogs knew anything, worth what they got their badges of merit for, they'd know that all pathology of every kind comes, number one, from trauma, and number two, from autophobia. They're actually connected. We can't explore it, but just take the second. Autophobia, psychophobia, or self-hate, self-loathing is the absolute, and I've been saying it for 20 years, it is the absolute root, the seed bed from which all pathology grows. And anyone that claims to be a psychologist, right, would know that. And he would never misdefine, not even in a slight way. He would never allow himself to misdefine narcissism. But this agent, provocateur, does so because he's got an agenda he wants to get to. He doesn't mind misdefining the word because then he wants to create a glue, he wants to connect a connection between the narcissism as he defines it, and I just said it's falsely defined, but he has a goal to get to, which is to link his version of narcissism to the conspiracy, to write an article, to hold up, to get on mainstream TV. And the twog at the other side of the fucking desk has no clue how to take him apart and go, but that's not even legitimately true. So what he's saying then, just to make it extremely clear, is that all conspiracy believers are narcissists. But then I ask yourself, and what meter did you use to measure that and find that out? You mean to me, you went to 400 people and you went, well, I'm a narcissist, of course, as well as a conspiracy theorist. Write that down. Make sure you got that. And print my name correctly.
Yeah.
I'm a narcissist. Just want you to all know that. How did you fucking measure it? It's just demonization. Go to the next one.
So same character, Vitriol. Yeah, Vitriol says conspiracy theories are tremendously problematic because they undermine trust in institutions and change perceptions of what is real. Nobody wants any of that. The further we deviate from an evidence-based understanding of reality, the less likely we're able to deal with it. Oh, this is gold.
Mm-hmm. So a new inquisition, right? You can't be a deviant. You can't be. Oh, the woman at the end of the street with the black cat. She was a deviant. She didn't fit what was real. Burn the witch. Remember that?
Yeah.
So this is a new inquisition. Yep. They've done it. It wheels out again. See, nothing has changed because unless you do your psychological work, nothing will change. All that will happen is the calendar dates will succeed the latter. But that doesn't mean there's any psychological change. A new inquisition is been authenticated in all of this. And with conspiratorialists being equated with other subcultural groups, except they're actually being sought out more than the other subcultural groups. And then we have to say, okay, if I agree with these people, how are we actually to deal with them? And as Thomas Sass says, always a certain population, the poor, the weak, the lonely, single mother, in early days it was mothers with children or the poor. You take a section of the public, lepers, it doesn't matter, malcontents, depressives, and you use them to pillory them. Basically the idea is that they're going to crack down. But first they have to identify an enemy. Who are the new witches to burn? Where's the new witch hunt? Where's the next mob rule? So, the weakness or the main failure in these articles is that they express the views, right, of people with degrees and credentials who are perfect idiots. They're institutionalized. They've jumped through the hoops. It is their vision of the world that is limited, prejudiced, biased, narrow, and toxic. They are the consummate narcissists, using the classic narcissistic rubric of blaming everybody else, right? A neurotic and a psychotic are linked. It's just a scale, right? But the neurotic is still healthy to the degree that they're still looking for the reasons for why they are depressed, unhappy, jaded, suicidal. There's still a voice of the conscience working to say, a question, why is it this way? Why am I this way? I just feel so depressed all the time. And to a certain degree, right, there's a questioning, there's an acknowledgement of the problem, and there's a healthy, or the small h, intent to fix it. By the time the neurotic has moved to the psychotic, there is only one answer to everything that the psychotic feels bad about: other people. Right? So they are now, but secondary to that is that the psychotic not only has no questioning anymore about his condition, other people are to blame. But what he also realizes is, or what he doesn't realize, but what he does is, the only other mechanism that he is functioning, other than anger against those people, other than utter violence, he's psychotic, that's what the word means. You lash out. See, you believe that now every aberrant condition within yourself, all your misery, your depression, your terrible despair, or whatever it is, other people are to blame. But you hide that from yourself by projecting it out. They're the psychotics. So it's an incredible mirror dynamic, right? And this is what's happening with these people. They are filled with doubt over the world because of what the conspiracy people and the research has brought to them. It has shattered their reality. It has undermined and cracked the foundations of their narrow view. And in that state of psychosis, they project psychosis on the enemy.
While preaching about us projecting on them, which is, that's the
it's exact reverse. And how you prove this is you can prove it very easily by just even going back and looking at these captions. But you can prove it by understanding that they are incapable of, like the psychotic is incapable of entertaining the simple alternative view that maybe the conspiratorialist is right. See, the neurotic and psychotic, the one thing they cannot do is put themselves in the position of the other. They remain fixed. And that's what these people are doing. So the question never crosses their mind, is my enemy correct? The whole Hegelian thing of, growing sophistication is banjaxed, and they're fixed. So all the and what is it that the conspiracy group is really saying? You'll wait 1,000 years for them to tell you what it is. It's simply this: the system is broken.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. That's it. I cannot list the number of sages and philosophers, H.L. Mencken, the most eminent writers, Mark Twain, who've said the same thing in 1,000 ways. The quotes are endless. That's all a conspiracy person is talking about. So where is all of this, Mr. Vitriol? Yeah, it is like throwing vitriol, appropriate name. But anyone else who would do that is simply incapable of putting themselves into the perspective of their opponent to say, hey, maybe I want to see through your eyes. I want to read some of your books, Mr. Sutton. You're from fucking Hoover Institute. You can't be put into the category of the tinfoil hat merchant.
Or Ted Gunderson. You used to direct the FBI.
Exactly.
He must be nuts.
And men of, yeah, right. And all that the conspiracy people have ever said is that there is a sinister, extremely powerful and wealthy group of individuals, the network of them. So it's not, as he said, 9 groups sitting in the Illuminati over in London somewhere. That's misrepresented. I started with that. They misrepresent the case. How could you possibly take them as authorities when they misrepresent the case? No conspiracy has ever said the 9 men sitting over in London or whatever his encapsulation was there, jocular fashion. Nobody's ever said that. What they've said is what I've said in the Black Nobility article. Systematically, they've done what Eustace Mullins has done. Name every name there is. Name their lineage. Tell you where they bank. Tell you how they're related, like a Diana Sprangola or somebody else like that. We've had her on the show talking about Winston Churchill and others, right? I don't see any ad hoc attacks there. I see nothing but voluminous research. I've critiqued the 95 plunkers %, but there's the 5% which is second to none. So when these people talk, right, they are misrepresenting and they're also demonstrating their myopia. If you had to add anything else to that about what conspiracy people really, stand for and why they get these detractors, is simply that they're lampooned only because they have to be criticized for unfreeing themselves, for unslaving themselves. That's their only fault. Somebody who's in chains is going to say, come you back in here. They're going to change the chains next week from iron to gold. What do you think you're doing trying to break out? That person will sit there in chains of iron or gold. He's not going to try and break out. And he resents the man that does. So why critique the media? We know they've lied to us for years, but it doesn't matter. That was the past. All you conspiracy guys, you're all crazy. You want justice. What about all the other institutions that have taught children lies after lies about all the wars, about everything you can imagine? I talk about, one of my theses is on Ireland. I'm going to believe the Jesuits in Trinity University and all their agents throughout all the schools and collegiates in Ireland. No, I have not believed them. I've believed the myths and legends. I guess I'm a conspiracy nutter. But when I then go to the great intellects, like I said, Professor Alan Bloom or Neil Postman and all the other people I could mention, and I cite those people and I mention them in my articles and I read their works, right? Those other people never mention any of that. So they're very, very biased. In my work, there's no bias. I just present the information and leave you completely free to think of it what you will. But what they're really trying to do is they will not present what it is that the dissenters dissent about. So when you have an opposition that will not state your cause clearly and respectfully, they're not an opposition. They're just a bunch of muckslingers. And you should scoff at them as much as they scoff at you. Don't, it's like, what did somebody say? When you protect man from their folly, you just fill the world full of fools. When you don't go after them.
Ain't that the truth?
So, yeah. So my final comments really is that dissent itself is always being pathologized. Whether it was when the Catholic Church doing it, whether it was any group doing it in any city in the world, in any place in the world, right? Dissent is pathologized. And your opponent just sets down a bunch of unflexible rules. And one of them is what Lenin said. You demonize the opponent. You blame him from what you're doing yourself, right? My psychotic. The psychotic has learned, and all that Lenin did was he made it a matter of policy, which is you accuse and you blame your enemy of exactly what you are doing yourself. You subtract from them any kind of legitimacy. If you have to represent them, you don't bring one of them on to tell. Where did you see one person invited there? And that egregious omission, to me, tells all. You don't have to read through it. You don't even have to do what we just did. The very fact that they had the gall to not bring on some eminent, person to speak for us, to speak for this movement, to champion it, already is an omission that tells you all about their fraudulence. It tells you that their outlooks are medievalistic, that it's just an inquisition. You stand there and shut up, and we're going to take you down and poke you with red hot irons tomorrow. What you say or you don't say, we'll catch you both ways. You work for the devil. If we can't find a mole, we'll find a blister. If we can't find a blister, we'll find, a bunion. But the devil's mark will be found. Oh, fuck, we'll put it there. If your skin is pure as silk, we'll make sure the mark is still found. And we'll even put it there. We'll draw it on, but you're going down. So their main point, as you see, the main thrust of everything there is it's unconfirmed, it's unratified, it's not evidence-based. I'm here to tell you that that's bollocks. And that even though that might be indeed accusable, you might accuse 90%, right, of the plunkers that have now filled this movement. Most of them are disingenuous to an endless degree. You cannot ever apply it to the people who started this movement and to many of their works, which have been thoroughly read and critiqued by intelligent people all over the planet. And because those people are a little bit vulnerable, and like myself, they're amateurs, right? They're humble, they're teachers, they just do what they do in their own little way. But because now we're being heard globally, that's what set this about. Not only the shadow banning, but then the open attacks. They couldn't resist it. But I just hope that we've shown, at least in brief here, why this industry exists, this machinery of lies, and that the people who are doing it are the ones who are the narcissists and the psychopaths.
Well said. It's demonstrable. And I mean, you can go and fact check this stuff. You can go see if any of the predictions made by some of the top 5% of this conspiracy research movement of what they said back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, or before, or if you go back to Myron Fagan and what he said back in the 1900s, and you go to like the UN website, or you go and read Ocasio-Cortez's Green New Deal, or you read the headlines and you hear the arguments being made, and then you see this kind of vitriol against anybody that questions it. You'll be able to verify this for yourself. You'll be able to verify yourself. They said New World Order. They said world government. They said, shut down dissent and censor anybody that doesn't go with the status quo of what we taught them at school and on television. They said it. We didn't say it. We're just simply sitting here reading what they said. Rockefeller said, I'm involved in a conspiracy and I'm proud of it. It's like page 404 in his frickin' memoirs. Go get it at Chapters. Go read that. They admitted it. Brzezinski admitted it in Grand Chessboard. Go read that book. If you want to get into the whole climate UN, sustainable development, Agenda 21 stuff, go read their own books that actually said this stuff. Go listen to the Kyoto Treaty in the 90s. Go look at it. Go read it right now. And go and look and see the steps that are being taken, even in your local governments, in your general region, in the world. When they talk about, chaos out of or order out of chaos, or they talk about, you hear this Machiavellian type of stuff, and everybody goes, oh, it's conspiracy stuff. Yeah, just look around the world for 5 minutes and you'll see that there's nothing but conspiracy happening. And then what about, this is the one thing we cover endlessly as well on Unslaved, is what about the conspiracy against the biggest minority in the universe, the individual in society? You, the individual. There's no mass group of people. That is an illusion. There are individuals either acting in concert with other individuals or deciding not to. That's all there really is. And that minority of you as an individual, meaning you have the right to your own mind, you have the right to your own thinking, you have the right to private property, you have the right to defend yourself, you have the right to do all these things because you're an individual, right? That's under attack. That's a conspiracy. Even Ayn Rand, who wasn't much of a conspiracy writer or anything like that, said it explicitly. The biggest conspiracy in the world is a conspiracy against the individual. And guess what? She's the most hated philosopher to ever walk around this planet. So just realize that, yeah, go ahead on that one.
No, it wasn't even mentioned in the encyclopedias of philosophy. Because her message.
Where's the feminists? Why aren't they defending her? Yeah.
Right. And that's censorship, just like what we're talking about now. They go after individuality, as you said. We have to understand what their whole agenda is. See, how can you do that? How can you go against the individualist without being a supporter of the opposite, which is collectivism? Right. So so most people listening to us right now and in the world don't know that the crowd is an institution,
right.
A very deadly one. Yeah. That has never crossed their mind. And the person who tells you that, right, is completely going to be pilloried and misinterpreted. If Nietzsche said it, or Max Stirner, or Ayn Rand, or Nathaniel Branden, whoever, there's many who've said it. Gabrielle Marcel, right? But they're not going to be listened to. They're going to be marginalized. You won't even heard of half their names. So if the collective is an institution, what do you know about it? What mechanisms does it have? What watchdogs does it have? Does it employ? How does it purvey itself? How does it sell itself? What are its exact critiques against the individual? See, we're miles and miles behind. But as I always say, history is the teacher because all of these people have already written about it. But these people hate not only the individual, it's more pragmatic even than that. By all of this new, looking over the fence and peeping through the keyhole of people like us, these people can't get on with their destructive work. The bully is forced a gang to come and fucking kick his ass. He's being photographed, right? The defenders are here, right? The samurai protectors are here. We're not letting the bully, rule the roost. He's going to be fucking finding himself a fucking, throwing star in the back of his head if he ever tries it again. What's that, right? We are not letting them getting on with their destructive agenda, which is what government's all about. So of course they're going to fight back. Of course they're going to get peeved. Of course they're going to throw some, dust in our faces. See, don't forget also that, as I said, in the anti-literate age, which wasn't that long ago, they could stalk the world openly, like predators and hyenas. They didn't have to hide away like tigers in the long grass that they're doing now. So they sit there and sulk. That's all this is, a one big fucking sulk. Even Thomas Jefferson noted that the media, I can't believe how people sitting reading newspapers every day, I can't remember the exact quote, but it's an actual quote where he says, I commiserate, I'm horrified by the people, they sit there thinking they know something about the world by reading the mainstream media. Thomas fucking Jefferson talked about the dumbing down of people. Why do these guys not, talk about that? Because they're apologists for the state. They've sold themselves out for a parking space, right, and a tenure or whatever the hell it is, to impress themselves. They're the narcissists. And then, with that institution behind them, they go for the low-hanging fruit of people in this movement, and I critique them as well, who've done some shoddy work. I'm half in favor of the critique. If it tightens up, your abs. If it gets you to, be a little bit more aware of what the hell is going on. Because I see tremendous fallout in this movement. I got a whole set of different critiques. We haven't got into that now. Like I said, we have pointed out things that are so relevant to today's world. The very reason why men are being incarcerated, silenced, shadow banned. And still, the pig-headed plonkers that infest this movement can't see further than, this conspiracy or that conspiracy. Completely misinterpreting what's actually going on. Demonstrably. Right, so then how will I find allegiance with those people? I've got the books that can refute them. I've got the evidence. I've got the evidence from inside the corridors of power. But it doesn't mean to these people, because they're partisan. They brought the fucking shutters down. Right?
In a way,
now,
isn't it
Pearls? What I will...
Go ahead. Finish that. I was just going to say, in a way, isn't it pearls before swine? Like, is there maybe a legitimate reason why a lot of this information was held behind closed doors that people maybe don't want to admit?
Yeah. You see, remember, really, this movement is a very marginal, small movement anyway. It isn't as big as anyone makes it. Right? It started off very small with a few people, and then even just like I say, a smaller group of them really had something worthy to say, but the quality of what they had to say was very great. Now, see, so in other words, I think people who are listening to this who've been into the conspiracy for a while, let's put it this way, slightly differently than we've just done in the last hour or so. There are many people you still don't read and you don't know about. The Antonio Ludovicis, the Bryants, the Arthur Bryants, and so on. I'm going down that road, including the Nathaniel Brandins and the Wilhelm Reiches and all. There's still people you haven't read. So there's still a long way to go in this movement, which is still fledgling. They're trying to clip our wings before we, become eagles. Right? What I've done in my work is presented you with the Ralph Ellises. That means you start at book 1 and you fucking read the man. That's what it fucking means, by the way. Not fucking flick around, surfing it. That's what it means. And if you haven't done it, then you're critiquable. And I got plenty more reading lists for you. The whole Ayn Rand, the whole Nathaniel Brandon, right? Corpus, and many others that I could mention. And I'm not going to sit here and take any of your fucking bullshit. So don't even sign on for this movement if it's as recreational, you said this earlier, as all the rest of the shit that you've been involved in your fucking life. This is vocational, and you better know the difference. Because if you don't, nature does. And you will end up with the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune hurtling towards you. And that will force you back into lockstep with the conformity. And some of these guys, that are doing this, and others, that's what they're hoping for. They're hoping for a, sort of a return of the regressed person. Just, I've been out there. I tried having that psyche thing. I don't like it. I'm just going back to the crowd. And that also happens. There's psychotic breakdown. There is a regression. There's return to the familiar, right? It happens. And a lot of these people are saying, oh, good lads, good lad. We're going to give you a star for coming back from all them boogaloo people out there. See, so you have to forge ahead. You've got to have Seneca said it, that you have to have the courage to lose sight of the shore if you're ever, of the familiar shore, if you're ever really going to strike out and discover new lands. And that all sounds good to people on paper, but it's not that easy to do, because it means that you have to be your own worst critic. You have to be able to second guess every act of self-deception. Right? And self-deception is the order of the day. We've unpacked it in dozens and dozens of works. You have to be able to, exercise a kind of a introspective quality, in which true feeling is very, very, very important. Anyone who tells you that feeling doesn't matter is a liar and a cheat. Feeling is very, very important because it undergirds, right, your life experience. And it's an essential. Feeling is a much more than, what I'm saying is not the kind of feeling that most people know, which is just some sort of a emotional thing. No, it's a wider bioenergetic receptivity to the stimuli that's around you, right? So it's a little bit broader than what people know as feeling, but basically it's a very important component, right? And so you have to then go along this journey, like we said, it's holy work. Read these masters, really read them with reverence, and then subject their work to, critique. Nobody in this movement, as far as I know, and anyone genuine would never tell you to accept as wholesale, right, and as effortlessly the knowledge of the conspiracy movement as all the conventional people demand you do when you go to school. You will never find, I don't care where it is, I don't care what college it is, where the teacher at the front of the class will allow you that freedom. It doesn't exist. It's academic within the conspiracy movement. They demand it. The good ones do. Don't believe a word I'm saying. Get your arms around all the information. The top colonels have said this.
I think we say it every
not
show.
To believe them.
Yeah,
we say it every show, and rightly so. But you will never be allowed that freedom in academia. In fact, you'll be demoted. You'll be given the F. As soon as you write something they don't want to hear, something that doesn't fit the narrative, they'll penalize you. So hidden behind all those little comments that we showed, those captions, is that threat, that lingering big boot, Orwellian boot in your face. You have to be able to feel it. You've got to know the sinister intent. Their own symbols show you that they're, wolves in sheep's clothing. What more do I need? I didn't invent that. They're showing you that. And these Fabians from Britain, and Europe have infested the institutions of America. And they're winning. They're socializing you. They're regressing you. And they're replacing knowledge with social hysteria, conformity, and all sorts of other entrainment. The conspiracy person studies those things, and that's why it's such a major threat. In the pre-literate period, they had you crawling around like some abysmal creature, right? In a stew, just some cockroach that they can crush under their hooves. They know you're standing up right now. They know you're literate. And that's a tremendous danger and always has been. But I will never downplay the fact that it is a tremendous struggle, a tremendous sacrifice. It is difficult. It is hard. But you see, you always weigh it up in what you're coming out with in terms of wisdom. But you'll come out with no wisdom if there's not love of wisdom there. That's the missing part in so many people in this field. They're out for what it can get them. They love the power and the fame and the success it gets them. Right, by warming themselves at that great fire. But that is all the world of difference between loving wisdom. And in the end, they'll soon find out. They'll soon find out that they've been had. And they'll soon fall foul of forces far greater than these detractors. These detractors, right, like this guy, all they really want you to do is conform. If you really, think it out, always know a thing by taking it out the farthest. What would pacify them? What would Mr. Vitriol and this chick that wrote this other art, what would really satisfy them? Just that you crawl back in the box from which you came in the first place. They're not asking for your soul. They're just asking for a bit of mental conformity, a bit of entrainment. Don't rock the boat. But what the truth asks you to do, it's unimaginable. It's the path of the fool. It is an unimaginable act of immolation, self-crucifixion, going through the underworld and coming out again. right? So they don't need to be blasting away their full guns at anybody in the world that they might get into conspiracy. The people already reach the fence and turn right back without your browbeating. This movement is already self-policed. People are already happy to stay within the lights of the known and not venture out. There's nobody needs to warn you to stay within, the city lights. The fucking fear and anxiety of the truth lying out there in the darkness already always has and always will do your work for you. So this is just bluster from a bunch of people who are basically psychotic and just involved in, what psychologists know as classic transference of the psychotic, the one who's able to end his neurosis and come to a certain pseudo peace by saying, well, everybody else is responsible. And you'll never, ever, ever, ever change their mind. There's people, no matter how much you confront them with so much evidence, they'll smile and look at you and go, no, you're wrong. It's everybody else. And then as maybe a secondary adjunct to that, they project their own psychopathy, right, and psychosis onto all of the world and then retreat, draw the circle around themselves and retreat there. They've locked out the entire world and they've still got a smile on their face. These people are doing this intellectually in exactly the same way, threatened by people who are looking through the keyhole, who are, peering over the fence, who are thinking big, standing back from the canvas and trying to understand the greater reality. And they're and the fact that they're threatened, why are we shadowed? If they weren't threatened, why are all these people banned?
Exactly. Yeah. If we got nothing to say, why are you trying to shut us up and lock us up? Michael, this has been just a gem, and I so appreciate you coming on and doing this with me. And I just wondered if maybe we could finish off one thing that I think is always important to talk about when we talk about this subject of conspiracy, is that this doesn't just start in America. This isn't something recent. This isn't just something happening in the headlines now. This is something that is age old, and we've done countless masterpieces on Unslaved, 4 or 5 hours long each, and we've done probably dozens and dozens of them. But just a little highlight for people just to understand that when it comes to the criminal history of mankind in this way, at a very elite, powerful level, there's nothing new under the sun, is there?
No, because remember, it's outside of materialistic account of what man is a will to meaning. So that means that even when he's got the fleet of yachts and Porsches and the cute wife, and the swimming pool and all the money in the world, there's still irritation. There's still a quest. Most men don't know this, but that doesn't change the fact that I'm stating. It is a fact that it is that the will to meaning will manifest. So that means that now when you start walking that road, right, there's going to be lots and lots of obstacles. So the difference between a sage and a psychopath is this, that the psychopath encounters this fucking boulder, right, on his pilgrim's process up the mountain, and he goes, fuck, that's a bastard, right? He gets over it and carries on walking, going, shit, wish that wasn't there. The sage sees the same boulder, finds a way around it, and then moves the boulder for his brothers and sisters coming behind him so that they can make their journey that much easier. That's the difference. Now, there's an argument, that's what Plato said about the wise man going back into the cave. He frees himself from the shadows and the darkness, but he doesn't just take off and continue, right? He knows at some level he's got to return to that cave and at least tell them they're in a fucking cave, right? Now, that dynamic is actually always going to live itself out in this world, because that's just the interplay. We didn't invent it. It's something ontological. You seek for the truth, you find a piece of wisdom, a nugget of insight, and there's automatically something born in us to go and share it with somebody else. Right? That's because we're naturally empathic. Not the psychopath. He's lost his empathy thanks to, issues in his childhood. Nobody's born evil. But on the whole, there's a natural drive for us to go and share, right, what we found. And I don't mean share one-to-one. I'm a personalist who believes that there's heavy duty, qualification to that. But it doesn't mean that you completely shut off. No, there is a sharing that is required. There is a teacher, pupil relationship. There is these dynamics of how you not only gain knowledge, but how you relate to knowledge, right? All of this we've said is true. But there is also a genuine empathic reaching out to the other. It's inevitable. Because as Hegel said, you're not just conscious, you're self-conscious, right? All animals are conscious, but they're not really self-conscious. And some are, but in a very, very foggy way. Only the human being finds himself not only to be a conscious entity, but a self-conscious entity with introspective qualities and all the rest of it, right? And a great deal of sort of control over his thought and his being, right? So then he really, Hegel said, discovers the depth of self-consciousness, of the gift of it, only when he meets the other. And then the journey begins. Before that, it's very a vague thing you can just throw away. But when you meet the other, right, in the truest sense of the word, the fact that you are self-conscious becomes a very, very great, lucid fact. And then the rest of the process, is the unfolding of what it means to be self-conscious. So in that process, there's a lot of sharing and a lot of empathy, a lot of drop out of the empathy and all the things we know, right? And one of those things is that when I look into the other, I never can equalize myself spiritually with them unless I see the same values. Or if I see the will to meaning, if I've got it, right? Everybody equals off with each other based on those values. If you've got no values and I've got no values, we like each other. If I got very high values, but you do too, then we're friends. You see like that? It's values that matter most. So the conspiracy that they're talking about, which I put on their doorstep, it's these people. They're the ones whose value is totalitarian, authoritarian, truly hierarchical in the toxic sense of I must control. And the reason why they do that, we've already explained umpteen times, is because these are types, pathological, they're called constitutional psychological inferiors. I also call them constitutional moral inferiors. And you can be as offended by that as you want. These people are moral inferiors because, and how it works out in general play, right, is that I cannot rise spiritually myself, but I can push others down and feel high accordingly.
Right.
Now, this is actually going on. The sociopath can only push others down. That's why he joins institutions of religion and science and government that are, the hedonic man does. Those are the ones by which I put the boot on your neck. And then sitting there with everybody else crawling, I now feel high. But that's not high. That's not the real attainment. That's just the imitation of it. The sage frees you from himself and frees himself of you. And only in that level of total freedom does he move forward into whatever. Now, I happen to believe that that's where personalism begins, because no one can define for an individual where his individual road. Truth is a pathless land. So that's where I cut off. I don't make any statements about any paths because there is no path. I'm a disciple of the pathless land. And the freedom, the complete freedom to throw away the compass and be guided by the great ultimate. Any shadow of statement, comment, advice is already in the front at that point, you see, so I don't go there. But I know that the person will be, they'll find themselves and they'll reach their own limit. So to answer your real question is that as long as the will to meaning is there, people will always be in conflict with the ones who have the will to power. And we've just described the will to power as being, I push you down in order to feel high. The sage says, I transcend you to feel high. I link myself to the highest. But in doing so, I'm able to shed, sacrifice, shed, leave, forego, abstain, discover. And the only thing to add to that is that when he picks up those pearls of truth, he fondles them carefully and lovingly. Whereas the psychopath goes, what's that? How much will I get for it? How much is that in the open market?
Yeah,
I'm ready to sell it right away for some other illusion. So it's the sage and the psychopath, and trying to see their commonalities, how much of the road they walk together, and what are their fundamental dissimilarities. That's what it's all about. And these are the compasses that keep you sane while you're on your own Siddhartha road.
Wow, well said. And just incredible information as always, Michael. You always inspire me with the way that you talk about this, and also making this more than just, let's find out who killed who and what palace plot did this and what blew up this building and all that kind of stuff. Like, that's all interesting, but what makes this work unique is that it comes back to the reason of why you're here, the great philosophical questions. So if people are interested in this kind of information, there's a very good reason that our other project, unslave.com, is much more exclusive. It's not something that is broadcast widely. It's something that is it's a masterclass. It's something that is special and it's to be preserved and protected. And it's also what allows us to do this work. So if you want to support us more and get more information like this show, if you loved it, is really just scratching the surface. If you want the full story, head over to unslaved.com and check it out. We're actually in the process of revamping the project, making it even better, introducing new forums and things like that are going to blow your mind. So that's good. Did you have any closing remarks about Unslaved, Michael, or what's coming up very soon we're going to be looking at?
A lot of things coming up on catastrophism, continuing my idealism, series. There's a little mini series right now on female psychology based on my Dragon Mother book and all of that. We just started that. So on Sunday, we'll be doing the second of that, which is Exposing the Secret and the Law of Attraction Cult. That's the title. Deeply going into that whole thing. Again, a bunch of gatekeepers who are actually preventing you from true individuation and spiritual development. So we're going to unpack that. And then there's 2 more in that mini series. So lots of great stuff to come.
I can't wait. It's going to be great. And you can check out all of Michael's articles at his website, michaeltsarion.com. We'll be filling in the links later once this show is rendered and it's up on YouTube. Please share it. And thank you all for your amazing commentary. I had no time to go through and check everybody's comments, but thanks for making them. Thanks for coming out. I hope you learned something. And as we always say, take it for what it's worth and go and follow this trail yourself. Go research it. Go look at the links. Go look at the sources. Make up your own mind. Don't let the media tell you what to think. And we'll catch you another time here on Truth Warrior. Thanks, everybody.